Hey there, tonight we're diving into 9/11 through a firefighter's eyes, exploring the day that changed America. But what you're about to discover is the surprising courage and camaraderie that unfolded amidst the chaos. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now get comfortable, perhaps dim the lights, or find that perfect pillow position, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's a typical Monday morning in New York City, September 10, 2001, and you, as a firefighter, are gearing up for another day at the Firehouse. The air still carries the lingering warmth of summer, and the city is bustling with its usual energy, a symphony of honking taxis, street vendors shouting their daily specials, and the ever-present hum of the subway below. But hey, it's nothing you can't handle, right? After all, you're part of the FDNY, a force of 11,000 strong, ready to tackle fires, emergencies, and the occasional cat-in-a-tree situation. The Firehouse is like a second home. Camaraderie here isn't just a word, it's a way of life. This place buzzes with banter and inside jokes that would make an outsider raise an eyebrow. You and your fellow firefighters share a bond forged in the crucible of adrenaline and danger. You know that when the bell rings, you're not just running into a burning building, you're running into it together. And let's be honest, the Firehouse dinners are legendary. Who knew that Frank, the guy who can barely manage a garden hose, could whip up a mean chicken parm? Now, let's talk about the FDNY itself. It's not all glory and heroics, despite what they show in the movies. The department is a massive operation, with a budget that would make a Wall Street banker blush, over $1 billion annually. Here's the kicker. Even with that kind of cash, there's always a scramble for resources. Trucks need maintenance, gear needs replacing, and training is constant. It's a delicate balance between being prepared for anything and stretching every dollar like it's the last slice of pizza after a long shift. But back to you. Today, your mind is on the drill scheduled for the afternoon. A routine fire simulation, important but somewhat mundane. You know the drill like the back of your hand, but complacency isn't in your vocabulary. The city keeps you on your toes with its refuse fires, false alarms, and the occasional rescue operation. It's a dance of sorts, with Manhattan's skyline as your backdrop. Speaking of the city, let's not forget the vibe. New York, with its towering skyscrapers and crowded streets, is a living, breathing entity. The skyline is a testament to human ambition and perhaps a touch of hubris. The Twin Towers stand tall and proud, dominating the skyline, a symbol of economic power and architectural prowess. They say that the towers are indestructible, and why wouldn't they be? Designed to withstand hurricane-force winds, they're engineered to be as tough as the city itself. Despite the everyday grind, there's a certain romance to being a firefighter in New York. The public perception teeters between awe and expectation. Some days, you feel like the city's guardian angel, and other days, like a glorified janitor with a hose. But you wouldn't trade it for anything. The unpredictability, the danger, the camaraderie, it's all part of the package. As you sit in the Firehouse kitchen, sipping what is arguably the worst coffee in New York, you can't help but think about the challenges the department faces. Budget cuts are always looming like a bad date you can't shake. The city expects miracles on a shoestring budget, and while you're good, you're not quite Houdini. Still, you make do. Duct tape and creativity are your best friends. Tonight you'll head home, maybe catch a game on TV or have dinner with family. You'll go to bed thinking about tomorrow's shift, which at this point promises nothing extraordinary. But in the back of your mind, you know that in this city, the only thing predictable is unpredictability. Little do you realize, though, that the world as you know it is about to change dramatically. But for now, it's just another day, another dollar, and another fire waiting to be put out. But here's the thing about unpredictability. It doesn't knock. It crashes through the door like a bull in a china shop, and suddenly, you're not sipping bad coffee in the Firehouse kitchen anymore. It's Tuesday morning, September 11, 2001, and the city is waking up like any other day, except it's about to become anything but ordinary. You're relaxing in the Firehouse, maybe still rubbing the sleep from your eyes, when the first dispatch call hits. Routine? Not quite. American Airlines Flight 11 has just struck the North Tower of the World Trade Center at 8, 46A, M. Initially, it sounds like a freak accident, an unfortunate mishap on a clear day. But as the chaos unfolds, that notion evaporates faster than a promise from a politician. The FDNY response is nothing short of Herculean. You and your fellow firefighters swing into action, adrenaline pumping like it's on special offer. The iconic fire trucks, those red behemoths of steel, are about to become your chariots. But unlike the movies where they glide smoothly through city streets, reality has a less cinematic script. New York traffic, even on a good day, is a beast, and today it's a full-blown Cerberus with honking horns and gridlocked intersections for heads. The firehouse turns into a flurry of activity. You slap on your gear as if your life depends on it, because it does. Bunker pants, jackets, helmets. It's not just about looking the part. This gear is your second skin, and at this moment, it's the only thing between you and the inferno ahead. We're talking about equipment that could set you back a cool $3,000, but today, it's worth its weight in gold. As you scramble onto the fire truck, the engine roars to life, and you're off. Well, sort of. You see, navigating Manhattan's labyrinth of streets is like playing a real-life game of Frogger, only with bigger stakes. You're weaving through traffic that's more tangled than a conspiracy theory, trying to make sense of the surreal sights around you. People are stopped in their tracks, staring skyward in disbelief as smoke billows from the skyline. Approaching the site, the enormity of the situation hits you like a freight train. There's no preparing for the sheer scale of it. The towers loom above, and suddenly you're not just a firefighter, you're a witness to history. But there's no time for awe. The landscape is chaos incarnate, debris, dust, and the unmistakable scent of jet fuel. It's a sensory overload that could make the toughest of you question what you signed up for. Now, let's talk logistics. The physical demands of being a firefighter on a day like this are staggering. You're lugging gear that weighs about as much as a small child, 75 pounds or so, and that's before you even get to the hoses and axes. It's a workout that would make a Navy SEAL sweat, all while navigating stairwells that feel endless. Dispatch calls are flying in faster than you can process. Over 200 units are responding, and the airwaves are a cacophony of voices trying to make sense of the pandemonium. The FDNY communication system, already stretched thin on a regular day, is now pushed to its breaking point. It's organized chaos, with an emphasis on chaos. The emotional toll is as grueling as the physical. You're trained for emergencies, sure, but this is a crisis of unprecedented scale. You're not just fighting fire, you're wrestling with fear and uncertainty. The camaraderie that felt like a luxury yesterday is now your lifeline. The guy next to you isn't just a colleague. He's your brother in arms, and you go through hell and back for him. As you finally reach the scene, the surreal nature of your surroundings is inescapable. The streets are an apocalyptic tableau, filled with dust-covered civilians moving like ghosts through the smoke. Their eyes are wide with disbelief, and in that moment, the enormity of what lies ahead crystallizes. It's not just about saving buildings, it's about saving lives. Yet, amidst the chaos, some things remain achingly familiar. The iconic fire trucks, now parked among rubble, stand as symbols of resilience and duty. They're not just machines. They're a testament to every firefighter who's ever answered the call, and today they are the silent witnesses to both tragedy and heroism. The demands of the job push you to your limits, both physically and emotionally. As you make your way into the towers, the weight of your responsibility feels heavier than your gear. Every step isn't just a movement, it's a commitment to protect and serve, even in the face of unimaginable danger. You see, the romantic notion of the fearless firefighter is only part of the story. Sure, courage is involved, but so is a hefty dose of grit and determination. Today, bravery is not the absence of fear, but the resolve to act despite it. It's about putting one foot in front of the other, even when every instinct screams to turn back. There's no sugarcoating the reality. The job demands more than you thought possible. But in the chaos, there's also clarity. The mission is simple, even if the path isn't. Save who you can, and bring your brothers back home. It's a mantra that echoes in your mind as you climb ever higher, into the heart of the inferno. As the morning unfolds, the city holds its breath, watching as you and your fellow firefighters perform acts of heroism that will become the stuff of legend. But legends don't form in a vacuum. They're shaped by sweat, sacrifice, and the relentless pursuit of duty. And today, you're not just living history, you're riding it one step at a time. So here you are, a firefighter in New York City on the day that changed everything. The legends of old had dragons and quests. You've got fire and towers. But the core remains the same, a battle against insurmountable odds, driven by a sense of purpose that defies explanation. And as the day continues to unfold, you know that whatever happens, you're in it together. Because in the end, that's what truly matters. As the smoke thickens and the air becomes a cocktail of dust and disbelief, you realize that the day's agenda has been rewritten in the most brutal way. You're not just at ground zero. You're in the eye of a historical storm. The Twin Towers, those once invincible icons of human ingenuity, are now a grim playground of chaos. Debris rains down like confetti at a disastrous parade, each piece a reminder that the unthinkable has become reality. Your mission is clear, but the path is a minefield of challenges. The sheer scale of destruction is mind-boggling. This isn't just battling a fire, it's grappling with the colossal weight of a catastrophe. The North Tower alone was 368 feet of steel and glass, and every fallen piece of it seems to be conspiring to make your job as hard as possible. You're navigating a maze of concrete and steel, each step a gamble between life and injury. Let's not sugarcoat it. The physical demands are Herculean. The gear you're wearing is supposed to be your shield, but it's also a relentless adversary. At around 75 pounds, it feels like you're carrying a small person on your back. Add to that the weight of a high-rise pack, 50 feet of hose and a nozzle, and you're practically a walking gym advertisement. Your lungs scream for relief as the ambient temperature climbs to a blistering 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit in some areas. It's like trying to breathe while your chest is being crushed by a hydraulic press. Amid this inferno, you're not just dealing with flames. There's the constant threat of falling debris, like a game of Tetris gone horribly wrong. You glance up, and it's a lottery of fate. Will it be a piece of rubble or a chunk of office furniture descending from above? You push on, shoulders squared against the calamity, because turning back isn't an option. Not today. You're not alone in this madness. Your fellow firefighters, around 343 of whom will not make it home, are all around you, embodying both the best and the most tragic aspects of humanity. They're heroes, sure, but they're also flesh and blood, men and women driven by duty, yet not invincible. It's easy to mythologize them, but let's be real. They're scared, they're tired, and they're human. There's a line from a firefighter on that day that sticks with you. We're just trying to get up there and do what we can. It's humble, almost absurd in its simplicity, yet it captures the essence of what's happening. You're not superheroes with capes. You're people with hoses and helmets, facing a nightmare with no script. It's the kind of raw, unfiltered reality that history books often gloss over, but there's no escaping it here. The communication system is another beast altogether. It's a symphony of chaos with a soundtrack of static and shouted codes. The FDNY radios are struggling, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of traffic. You're trying to piece together information from fragments, like assembling a puzzle blindfolded. It's frustrating and it's risky, but it's all you've got. Let's talk about logistics, the kind they don't show in heroic montages. The anxiety of running out of air is a constant companion. Your self-contained breathing apparatus, SCBA, is a lifeline, but it's finite. Each tank holds about 30 minutes of air, but in the heat and stress, it feels like mere moments. You move with a calculated urgency, aware that every second counts. And then there's the heat. It's oppressive, a tangible force that saps your energy and tests your resolve. The temperatures are brutal, enough to melt steel beams, which is exactly what's happening. You've trained for high heat, but this is off the charts. Each step into the unknown is a battle against a furnace, and you're feeling more like a blacksmith than a firefighter. The myths about the day paint you and your colleagues as fearless demigods, but reality is far more nuanced. Bravery is tinged with fear, courage with doubt. You're not immune to the primal instincts that scream at you to turn and run. But you don't. You press on, driven by the hope of saving lives and the unspoken bond with those around you. It's not just heroism, it's humanity at its finest and most fraught. As the towers groan under their own weight, a chilling realization sinks in. The structures, designed to withstand incredible forces, are succumbing. The South Tower collapses first, at 9:59 a.m., and the North Tower follows at 10:28 a.m. The sound is a roar that silences everything else, a symphony of destruction that leaves you momentarily stunned. In those minutes, the world changes. The landscape of New York is irrevocably altered, and so are you. The dust cloud that follows is biblical in its scope. It engulfs everything in its path, turning day into night. You're swallowed by a darkness that defies description. It's a choking, blinding fog that clings to your skin and fills your lungs with grit. You're stumbling, trying to find your bearings in a world turned upside down. But even as you grapple with the enormity of what's happened, the mission remains unchanged. You're here to save lives. The faces of those you've rescued flash before you, a reminder of why you signed up for this in the first place. It's easy to get lost in the despair, but there's a glimmer of hope with each life pulled from the wreckage. It's not enough to erase the tragedy, but it's something. The day drags on, each hour blurring into the next. You're running on adrenaline and fumes, your body a patchwork of bruises and cuts. But there's a resilience that refuses to be snuffed out. You're not just fighting fire, you're fighting despair, and every small victory counts. It's a marathon, not a sprint, and you're in it for the long haul. As you navigate the debris, the stories of the day unfold around you, each as unique and harrowing as the last. There are tales of bravery and sacrifice, of civilians who became heroes, and of lives lost too soon. You're a part of this tapestry of history, each action a thread woven into the fabric of a day that will never be forgotten. And so, as the dust begins to settle and the enormity of the task ahead becomes clear, you know that this is just the beginning. The battle is far from over, but you're not alone. The camaraderie that was once a luxury is now a lifeline, pulling you through each moment with the promise of better days ahead. In the end, you're reminded that history isn't just about dates and facts. It's about people, flawed, courageous, and utterly human. And today, you've seen the best and worst of humanity, all in the span of a few hours. As you stand amidst the ruins, you know that while the towers have fallen, the spirit of those who faced the fire hasn't. It's a spirit that will rebuild, remember, and remain resilient, even in the face of unimaginable loss. But just as the dust begins to settle, both literally and figuratively, reality reasserts itself with a vengeance. The aftermath of the tower's collapse is more than just a physical landscape littered with debris. It's an emotional minefield. As a firefighter, you're not just dealing with the loss of structures, but the loss of comrades, brothers and sisters in arms who went up those towers with you, only to never return. The numbers are staggering. In the FDNY alone, 343 firefighters lost their lives, a devastating blow to a department that prided itself on its strength and unity. It's the largest loss of life for emergency responders in a single event in American history. These aren't just statistics. They're faces, names, and stories, each one a person you shared meals with, laughed with, and yes, argued with over the last donut in the box. In the immediate aftermath, there's no time for formal mourning. The city is in crisis, and you're still in rescue mode. Injuries among the survivors are rampant. Burns, broken bones, and respiratory issues from the toxic dust are the new norm. Your own body is a patchwork of bruises and scrapes, each one a testament to the chaos you've just endured. The adrenaline that once coursed through your veins is now replaced with a bone-deep exhaustion, an ache that doesn't just settle in your muscles, but in your soul. Yet, amidst this devastation, there's a strange camaraderie that blooms. It's a gallows humor that becomes both shield and salve. You find yourself joking about the absurdity of it all, like how your gear is now more duct tape than fabric, or how the coffee, which was bad before, now tastes like it was brewed in the Hudson. It's dark, it's irreverent, but it's what keeps you from spiraling into despair. After all, if you can't laugh at the insanity, then the insanity wins. The FDNY infrastructure is in shambles. Firehouses have been decimated, equipment destroyed. The cost is astronomical, not just in terms of dollars, though that's a hefty sum, running into millions, but in terms of morale. The city, for all its grit and resilience, is a wounded animal, and so is its firefighting force. Trucks that once rolled out with a dignified roar are now either buried under rubble or damaged beyond immediate repair. The gear that was your lifeline is now a collection of charred remnants. Rebuilding isn't just a task. It's a Herculean feat that will test every ounce of resourcefulness and tenacity you possess. But let's not sugarcoat the emotional scars. PTSD isn't just an acronym. It's a shadow that lurks, ready to leap out when you least expect it. Nightmares become frequent visitors, an unwelcome reminder of the horrors you've witnessed. The mental toll is as real as any physical injury, yet it's often relegated to whispers in the locker room, a stigma wrapped in silence. The department knows it, you know it, but there's that stubborn firefighter mentality, the need to be the unflinching hero. That makes asking for help feel like admitting defeat. Yet, amidst this personal and professional wreckage, there's a glimmer of resilience. The initial steps toward recovery are tentative, but they're there. The city rallies around its firefighters, showering them with support and gratitude. Donations pour in from every corner of the globe, a testament to the world's recognition of the bravery displayed. It's a financial lifeline that will help rebuild firehouses, replace equipment, and perhaps, slowly, mend spirits. Politically, the landscape shifts. The FDNY, once seen as just another city department, becomes emblematic of New York's indomitable spirit. You're hailed as heroes, a term that sits uncomfortably on your shoulders, like a jacket that doesn't quite fit. After all, you were just doing your job right. But in the court of public opinion, you're not just firefighters anymore. You're symbols of courage and sacrifice. It's a double-edged sword, this newfound status. On one hand, it brings much-needed attention and resources to the department. On the other, it places you on a pedestal where any fall is that much farther. The broader implications for the FDNY are profound. The department, always a tightly knit community, becomes even more so. There's a re-evaluation of protocols, training, and equipment. The lessons learned from the inferno are hard-won, etched into the memory of every firefighter who survived. There's a focus on mental health, albeit slow and hesitant, but it's a start. The department begins to understand that resilience isn't just about physical toughness, but mental fortitude. Amid the rubble, there's a commitment to honor those who fell. Memorials spring up, both official and makeshift, marking the spots where lives were lost and heroism found. It's a way to remember, but also a way to heal. These are not just tributes to the fallen. They're reminders that life, even in its darkest moments, can spark courage and compassion in ways unimaginable. As you sift through the ruins of that fateful day, the recovery process is slow, almost agonizingly so. But it's not static. There's movement, driven by the unyielding resolve of those who refuse to let tragedy define them. You're part of a brotherhood that will rebuild, not just for the sake of the department, but for the city that looks to you as its guardians. And so, as you stand amidst the echoes of what once was, there's a realization that while the towers may have fallen, the spirit of those who faced the fire has not. It's a spirit that will rebuild, remember, and remain resilient, even in the face of unimaginable loss. The journey from here won't be easy, but then again, nothing worth fighting forever is. As the dust of those fateful days begins to settle, the real work of rebuilding and reflection takes root. It's like waking up after a fever dream. The world looks the same, but everything has changed. For the FDNY, the legacy of September 11, 2001, is a tapestry woven with threads of loss, resilience, and transformation. Let's dig into what that means because, spoiler alert, it's not just about shiny new gear or a pat on the back. First up, the protocols. In the aftermath of 9/11, the FDNY underwent a seismic shift in how it approached emergency response. It was like flipping the board after a particularly brutal game of Monopoly. Everything needed re-evaluation. Communication systems got a major overhaul because, let's face it, radios failing during a crisis is like a parachute with holes, pretty much useless. The department invested in a $14 million digital radio system designed to ensure that when firefighters are in the thick of it, they can actually talk to each other. It's not just about having the right tools. It's about ensuring those tools work when it counts. And speaking of gear, the changes were as much about protection as they were about practicality. New lightweight turnout gear was introduced. Think of it as the difference between running a marathon in a spacesuit versus a tracksuit. This stuff is heat-resistant, but also breathable enough that firefighters aren't boiling in their own sweat. There's no denying the romance of a firefighter silhouette, but the reality. It's about making sure that silhouette is functional and, alive. Training protocols also got a facelift. The FDNY realized that fighting fires in high-rise buildings is a whole different beast, so they introduced specialized training for such scenarios. It's like swapping your regular gym routine for CrossFit. More intense, but necessary. Firefighters now run simulations that make the Tower of Terror look like the kiddie rides. It's a grim necessity, but one that ensures they're ready for anything, even if that anything feels like a scene out of a disaster movie. Then there's health monitoring. The environmental aftermath of 9/11 was a ticking time bomb. The toxic cocktail of asbestos, lead, and other nasties in the air was a silent killer. Studies show that more than 2,000 FDNY members have developed cancers linked to ground zero exposure. The department has since implemented rigorous health screenings, like an annual checkup, but on steroids, to catch and treat conditions early. It's a harsh reminder that the dangers of the job don't end when the fire's out. Now, let's tackle the elephant in the room, public perception. Before 9/11, firefighters were local heroes, the kind who might get a free coffee from the corner deli. Afterward, they were catapulted to the status of national icons. Suddenly, you were not just firefighters, you were firefighters with a capital F. A Gallup poll in 2002 showed that 90% of Americans viewed firefighters as trustworthy, a leap from the already high pre-9/11 levels. It's a pedestal that brings both admiration and scrutiny. Everyone loves a hero, but the expectations can be as heavy as the gear they wear. And let's debunk some myths while we're here. The notion of the fearless firefighter charging into flames without a second thought is a romanticized half-truth. Yes, courage is part of the DNA, but so is fear. It's just managed differently. It's about pushing through, doing what needs to be done, because the alternative is simply not an option. The reality is messy, filled with uncertainty and moments of doubt, but it's also filled with camaraderie and a shared purpose that turns fear into action. The harsh truth: the scars of 9/11 run deep. PTSD isn't just reserved for the battlefield. It's a constant companion for many first responders, a shadow that lingers long after the dust has settled. The FDNY has made strides in mental health support, but it's a process. Stigma doesn't vanish overnight, and the macho image of the unflappable firefighter is a stubborn beast to slay. Yet, amidst the ashes, the spirit of camaraderie burns bright. The FDNY is a family, bound not just by duty, but by shared experience. The stories of that day, of bravery, sacrifice, and resilience, are not just tales to be told, but lessons to be lived. They remind us that while buildings may fall, the spirit of those who face the fire does not. It's a testament to the enduring legacy of firefighters everywhere, a legacy that isn't just written in stone, but in the everyday acts of those who continue to serve. So, as you hang up your gear at the end of another shift, you're not just closing a chapter. You're continuing a story that's been told through generations, a story of resilience, courage, and above all, humanity. It's a reminder that while history can be a harsh teacher, it also offers the opportunity to learn, to grow, and to honor those who have paved the way. And in doing so, you ensure that the spirit of the FDNY, like the city it serves, remains unbreakable. In the vibrant chaos of 4th century Alexandria, where camels and philosophers shared the same bustling streets, one might say the city was like the internet before the internet existed, a hub of knowledge, trade, and the occasional heated debate over who wore the toga best. Alexandria was a place where the great library was the crown jewel, a monument to human curiosity and the ancient world's answer to an all-you-can-eat buffet of wisdom. Except, instead of unlimited shrimp, you got scrolls upon scrolls of the stuff that made scholars salivate. Enter Hypatia, born around 360 AD, who struts onto this intellectual stage like a rock star, with a penchant for geometry rather than guitars. In a world where men often considered brain power a strictly male domain, Hypatia was that rare phenomenon, a woman who taught men how to think. She was Alexandria's intellectual beacon, illuminating the minds of those who dared to question the universe. But let's not dive into the mythological pool of Hypatia just yet. First, let's talk about her hometown, Alexandria. Imagine a city where Greek, Egyptian, Jewish, and Roman cultures collided with the grace and subtlety of a marching band in a library. The city was a melting pot, a spicy gumbo of ideas and people, and its great library was the place to be if you had a hankering for knowledge. Founded in the 3rd century BCE, the library was said to house up to 700,000 scrolls at its peak, which sounds like a dream until you remember ancient scrolls weren't exactly portable. No wonder the librarians were so grumpy. Now, Hypatia didn't just wake up one day and decide to become a philosopher. It helped that she was born into a family that valued intellect over gender norms. Her father, Theon of Alexandria, was a renowned mathematician and philosopher himself. He wasn't the kind of dad who worried about his daughter's dowry. He was more concerned with her understanding of Euclidean geometry. Imagine family dinners at the Theon household, past the olives. And by the way, have you solved that pesky Pythagorean theorem yet? Hypatia's education was nothing short of extraordinary. She was trained in mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy, which in today's terms is like getting a PhD, in quantum physics, astrophysics, and the meaning of life, all before your morning coffee. She became head of the Neoplatonist school in Alexandria, a position that would make any philosopher green with envy, assuming philosophers ever envied anything other than another's ability to grow a better beard. But let's pause for a moment and consider the sartorial splendor of the era. The Greco-Roman fashion scene was a curious blend of practicality and the occasional fashion faux pas. Togas were the ancient equivalent of a tuxedo, minus the bow tie and plus a whole lot of fabric. Hypatia, however, was often depicted in a philosopher's cloak, which might not have been the height of fashion, but certainly conveyed her status. Picture her standing in front of a classroom, draped in a cloak that made her look like she was about to cast a spell or solve a complex equation. Both were equally likely. In her lectures, Hypatia didn't just regurgitate the same old philosophical platitudes. She challenged her students to think critically, to question the status quo, and to look beyond the surface of things, a skill that was as rare then as it is now. She taught the works of Plato and Aristotle, but she also added her own flair, like a chef who takes a classic recipe and adds a dash of something unexpected. Her influence was profound and far-reaching. Hypatia was no mere footnote in history. She was a full chapter. She corresponded with scholars from across the Mediterranean, and her fame spread like wildfire, or perhaps more accurately, like a well-timed tweet. Even the likes of Synesius of Cyrene, who would later become a bishop, considered her a mentor and friend. In one of his letters, Synesius referred to Hypatia as his most revered teacher, which, in the world of academia, is about as high praise as you can get without naming a building after someone. Yet, despite her intellectual prowess, Hypatia lived in a world that wasn't always kind to thinkers, especially those who dared to defy societal norms. Alexandria was a city of contrasts, where the pursuit of knowledge coexisted with political and religious tensions. Hypatia's life was a testament to the power of intellect in a time when wisdom could be as dangerous as it was revered. So, here she was, a woman in a man's world, leading a philosophical school and engaging with the brightest minds of her time. Hypatia was the embodiment of the idea that anyone, regardless of gender, could contribute to the collective understanding of the universe. She was a symbol of the possibilities that arise when knowledge is valued above all else. As we continue to explore her life and legacy, remember that Hypatia wasn't just a figure in history. She was a force of nature, and her story is just beginning to unfold. Hypatia's story was indeed just beginning to unfold, and now let's dive into the nitty-gritty of her intellectual legacy. In the realm of numbers and celestial bodies, Hypatia wasn't just a participant, she was a game-changer. She contributed heavily to mathematics and astronomy, fields often considered the playground of the gods, or at least the really nerdy demigods. Her work in algebra and geometry was groundbreaking, though let's be honest, the average Joe in the marketplace wasn't exactly using quadratic equations to haggle over the price of a goat. Hypatia's mathematics wasn't just about solving puzzles, it was about understanding the universe's order. Take her work on algebra, for instance. Algebra, deriving from the Arabic word al-jaba, meaning reunion of broken parts, was already on the rise in the ancient world, and Hypatia played a pivotal role in advancing it. She didn't invent algebra, but she certainly polished it like a diamond in the rough. But let's face it, while her work was brilliant and laid the foundation for future mathematicians, most folks were more concerned about counting their chickens before they hatched than tackling complex equations. Geometry, however, was where Hypatia shone like a supernova. Building on Euclidean principles, she taught geometry as a way to understand not just space, but the very fabric of reality. Imagine her classroom, filled with eager students, their minds buzzing as she deftly explained theorems and postulates. Her teachings would have been akin to a modern-day TED talk, minus the PowerPoint slides and the dramatic pauses. And while her students were likely excited, you can bet some of them were also wondering how this would help them in their daily struggle for bread and olive oil. Hypatia's contributions to astronomy were equally dazzling. She improved upon the work of Ptolemy, an ancient Alexandrian who had mapped the stars with impressive accuracy, given that he was essentially working with a glorified protractor and some serious patience. Hypatia took these celestial charts and helped refine them, making the cosmos a little less mysterious and a lot more fascinating. Her work on astrolabes, a sort of ancient GPS system for stargazers, was nothing short of revolutionary. But let's have a chuckle here. While Hypatia and her students were busy charting the heavens, the average Alexandrian was more concerned about navigating the crowded marketplace without stepping on a donkey. Now, Hypatia wasn't just about imparting knowledge. She was about challenging the very way people thought. Her teaching methods were as revolutionary as her subject matter. She encouraged critical thinking and dialogue, a sort of Socratic method on ancient steroids. Her classroom was a melting pot of ideas, a place where students could challenge each other, and more importantly, themselves. It was an intellectual boot camp designed to whip those minds into shape. Among her students was Synesius of Cyrene. Later became a bishop. Imagine the scene. A young Synesius sitting at Hypatia's feet, absorbing her every word like a sponge in a philosophical deluge. Synesius, who would eventually exchange his philosopher's cloak for a bishop's robes, never forgot his teacher's influence. He corresponded with her long after leaving Alexandria, often seeking her advice on matters both celestial and terrestrial. In one of his letters, he referred to her as his most revered teacher, a testament to her enduring impact. It's like your college professor still getting fan mail decades after their lectures ended. Yet, it wasn't just the intellectuals who were drawn to Hypatia's teachings. Her classroom was a rare, inclusive space where people from various backgrounds and beliefs came together. In a city as diverse and divided as Alexandria, this was no small feat. Imagine trying to hold a seminar on the cosmos while outside. The streets buzzed with debates about everything from politics to the price of barley. Hypatia managed to create an environment of learning that transcended these divisions, a place where the pursuit of knowledge was the ultimate goal. But let's not get carried away on the wings of romanticism. The reality was that Hypatia's life, like that of many thinkers before her, was fraught with challenges. The political and religious tensions in Alexandria were as volatile as a barrel of gunpowder, if gunpowder had existed back then. Her teachings, while revered by many, were also viewed with suspicion by those who felt threatened by her intellect and influence. In a world where knowledge was power, Hypatia was a force to be reckoned with, and not everyone was comfortable with that. In the end, Hypatia's story is a testament to the power of intellect and the enduring quest for knowledge. She was more than just a mathematician or an astronomer. She was a symbol of enlightenment in a world often shrouded in darkness. As we continue to explore her life and legacy, remember that Hypatia wasn't just a woman ahead of her time. She was a beacon for all time. Her story is far from over, so let's keep peeling back the layers of history to reveal the full picture of this remarkable scholar. And so we find ourselves in the bustling, chaotic streets of Alexandria, where the political tensions were thicker than a Greek yogurt smoothie. Hypatia, our heroine, was smack dab in the middle of a historical tug-of-war between Cyril, the Bishop of Alexandria, and Orsts, the Roman governor. Now, if you think today's political battles are intense, let me tell you, these two made modern political spats look like a playground disagreement over who gets the last juice box. Cyril and Orsts were like oil and water, cats and dogs, Coke and Pepsi. Pick your favorite metaphor for things that just don't mix. Cyril, the ambitious bishop with a flair for ecclesiastical drama, was all about consolidating the Christian church's power in Alexandria. He wasn't shy about using his influence to sway public opinion, and he had a knack for stirring up the local population faster than a Twitter feud can go viral. On the other side, you had Orsts, the Roman governor, who was all about maintaining the traditional Roman order and authority in the city. He represented the old guard, a blend of Roman legalism and Hellenistic culture, trying to keep the peace in a city that had a talent for chaos. Picture him as the beleaguered school principal trying to keep the peace while the students, religious factions, in this case, ran riot through the hallways. Caught in the middle was Hypatia, trying to be the Switzerland of Alexandria. As the city's intellectual beacon, she maintained a neutral stance, promoting reason and scientific inquiry over political maneuvering. But neutrality in a city like Alexandria was about as effective as a paper umbrella in a monsoon. Hypatia's friendship with Orsts, based on mutual respect and intellectual discourse, didn't exactly endear her to Cyril. The bishop, seeing her influence over the governor, likely viewed her as a threat to his power. And let's be honest, in a city where suspicion and paranoia were as abundant as sand in the desert, it didn't take much to find yourself on someone's bad side. The political tension of Alexandria was a tangled web of intrigue and rivalry. Cyril's rise to power was fueled by his followers, the Parabolani, a group of zealous Christian laymen who were as ready to preach peace as they were to enforce it with their fists. Think of them as a medieval neighborhood watch, but with a more aggressive recruitment campaign. Orsts, on the other hand, relied on the traditional Roman administration and its soldiers to keep order, which was a bit like trying to stop a flood with a sponge. Now, let's pause to appreciate the theater of it all. Cyril and Orst's feud was the ancient equivalent of a social media flame war, complete with public declarations, backroom deals, and the occasional street scuffle. The only thing missing was a hashtag, though if they had one, it might have been something like Hash Battle for Alexandria or Hash Scroll Wars. Hypatia's position as an intellectual and a pagan in a city increasingly dominated by Christian politics made her a lightning rod for controversy. Despite her lack of political ambition, her influence in intellectual circles and her association with Orsts painted a target on her back. She was the embodiment of the old Hellenistic traditions in a world rapidly shifting toward Christian dominance. Her very existence was a reminder of what Alexandria once was, a melting pot of ideas rather than a battlefield of ideologies. But let's not pretend Hypatia was some naive scholar caught unawares. She was acutely aware of the dangers her position entailed. She navigated the city's treacherous political waters with the skill of a seasoned diplomat, balancing her relationships with care. Her classroom was a refuge of reason, a rare space where the pursuit of knowledge transcended the chaos outside, but even she couldn't keep the storm at bay forever. In examining this historical drama, one can't help but marvel at the absurdities. The idea that a bishop and a governor could let their personal vendettas spiral into citywide chaos seems almost comedic if it weren't so tragic. The political machinations of Cyril and Orst's world highlight a universal truth. Power struggles are as old as civilization itself, and human nature hasn't changed as much as we'd like to think. Hypatia's precarious position in Alexandria serves as a testament to the power of ideas in a world of power politics. Her story is a poignant reminder that the pursuit of knowledge often comes with great risk, especially when that knowledge threatens the status quo. The conflict between Cyril and Orsts wasn't just about control of a city. It was a battle for the soul of Alexandria, a struggle over which vision of society would prevail. As we delve deeper into this saga, remember that Hypatia's story isn't just about the clash of political titans. It's about the enduring power of intellect and the courage to stand for reason in a world driven by fear and fanaticism. Her legacy is a beacon, illuminating the path for those who dare to think differently, even when the odds are stacked against them. Stay tuned, dear listener, as we continue to unravel the threads of this ancient drama. There's more to come in this tale of power, passion, and the pursuit of knowledge in the heart of Alexandria. Our journey through history is far from over, and Hypatia's story is just heating up. With our historical drama heating up, let's crank the dial to high and dive into the crescendo of Hypatia's life, a tragic finale that's been romanticized and dramatized more than any soap opera. It's time to peel back the layers and get to the truth, or at least as close as history allows us. The year was 415 AD, and Alexandria was a ticking time bomb of social unrest. The Christian church, under Cyril's ambitious leadership, was spreading its influence faster than rumors of a new toga sale at the local market. With the old pagan ways fading like a bad haircut, the city was in the midst of a seismic cultural shift. Think of it as the ultimate rebranding effort, and Cyril was the PR guru trying to pull it off. Hypatia, meanwhile, continued her quest for knowledge, unwittingly becoming the poster child for the old guard in a city turning its gaze toward the cross. Her intellectual salon was like a last bastion of the Hellenistic era, where the past's greatest hits were still on repeat, despite the city's changing playlist. Yet, as much as Hypatia tried to stay above the fray, she was about to be caught in the crossfire. Now, let's address the myths swirling around her death with the skepticism of a cat eyeing a particularly suspicious mouse. The popular tale is one of brutal martyrdom, a lone woman, defiant in the face of religious zealotry, tragically murdered by a frenzied mob. It's a story with all the drama of a Shakespearean tragedy and as much historical accuracy as a Hollywood blockbuster. But what's the reality? Well, there's no denying that the tensions in Alexandria were as volatile as a teenager's diary. Cyril, with his ecclesiastical ambitions, saw Hypatia not just as an intellectual rival, but as a symbol of the pagan past that he was so eager to suppress. Her association with Orst, the governor who was Cyril's political nemesis, only added fuel to the fire. In this powder keg of a city, it didn't take much for things to explode. The year had already seen its share of violence. Cyril and Orsts were locked in a power struggle that had the city divided like a pie at a family reunion where nobody likes each other. The Parabolani, Cyril's fervent followers, were more than willing to do his bidding, whether that meant preaching the gospel or, unfortunately, cracking a few skulls. Hypatia, ever the scholar, was focused on her work, perhaps believing that reason would prevail in a city where superstition and power politics were having a field day. But it was her intellectual independence that made her a target. She was accused of practicing witchcraft, an age-old slander against women who dared to think for themselves. It was the kind of baseless accusation that would have made even the most paranoid Roman senator roll his eyes. In March of 415 AD, the storm that had been brewing finally broke. Hypatia was seized by a mob, and what followed was a brutal and public murder that stunned the city. The details of her death are as gruesome as they are debated. Some accounts say she was dragged through the streets before being killed, others that she was murdered in the Caesareum, a former pagan temple-turned-church. What is clear is that Hypatia's death was as much a political act as it was a religious one. The aftermath of her death was a city in shock, and a legacy that would echo through the centuries. Hypatia became a symbol of the struggle between reason and fanaticism, a martyr for the intellectual freedom that she so fiercely championed. But let's not fall into the trap of romanticizing her end. Her death wasn't just a tragic footnote, it was a stark reminder of the dangers that come when power is wielded without restraint and when fear trumps understanding. Economically, Alexandria survived, but the intellectual vibrancy that had once defined the city took a hit. The great library, already in decline, became a relic of a bygone era. The city that had once been a beacon of knowledge now found itself navigating the murky waters of religious orthodoxy. It was a shift that would have long-lasting implications, not just for Alexandria, but for the world. Hypatia's legacy, however, refused to be silenced. Her story became a rallying cry for those who valued reason over dogma, a reminder that knowledge and enlightenment are worth fighting for, even when the odds seem insurmountable. She was the embodiment of intellectual courage in a world that was rapidly losing its appetite for such things. So, as we continue to unravel this tale, remember that Hypatia's life and death were more than just historical events. They were a turning point, a moment when the world shifted on its axis, and the echoes of that change are still felt today. Her story is far from over, and as we move forward, we'll explore how her legacy continued to influence generations of thinkers who followed in her footsteps. In the end, Hypatia wasn't just a scholar or a philosopher. She was a symbol of the human spirit's unyielding quest for knowledge. Her life and her tragic death serve as a poignant reminder of the power of ideas and the enduring impact of those who dare to challenge the status quo. As we delve deeper into the annals of history, stay tuned for more revelations, more insights, and more stories that will make you question everything you thought you knew about the past. Our journey is far from over, and Hypatia's story has more chapters to unfold. And so we find ourselves at the end of Hypatia's story, a tale that has been told and retold, each time with an extra layer of myth for good measure. After all, who doesn't love a good story? The truth is, Hypatia's legacy is far more complex than the simplistic narrative of martyrdom and enlightenment. She was a woman of her time, yes, but she was also a woman for all time. Her influence didn't end with the tragedy of her death. It rippled out, like intellectual aftershocks, through the centuries. Let's start with the medieval scholars, who found in Hypatia a kind of intellectual ancestor. During the Middle Ages, when Europe was deep in the metaphorical Dark Ages, the Islamic world preserved and expanded upon the works of ancient scholars like Hypatia. Her teachings, particularly in mathematics and philosophy, were translated into Arabic and filtered into Europe through Spain and other points of contact. In this way, Hypatia's ideas became part of the intellectual fuel that would later ignite the Renaissance, a period characterized by a renewed interest in classical knowledge. If Hypatia were alive, she might have raised an eyebrow at the medieval scholars' reverence, but she would have appreciated their devotion to knowledge. Then there's Hypatia's symbolic importance in modern times. She's become a poster child for rational thought and gender equality, a sort of intellectual superhero complete with toga and the power to inspire across millennia. But let's not get carried away on the superhero analogy. She didn't leap tall buildings in a single bound. Her foray was more in the realm of rising above societal expectations. In the 19th and 20th centuries, as the women's rights movement gained momentum, Hypatia was heralded as a precursor to feminist ideals. She was that rare figure who transcended her era, reminding us that intellect knows no gender. However, the romanticized image of Hypatia as a lone female genius in a sea of male mediocrity is a bit of a caricature. Alexandria, after all, was a city teeming with intellectual activity, and while Hypatia was exceptional, she wasn't the only bright mind in the room. Her father, Theon, and her students, like Synesius, contributed to a vibrant intellectual community. This isn't to downplay Hypatia's achievements, it's to place them in context. She stood out, not because she was the only woman doing remarkable things, but because she was part of a lineage of thinkers who valued knowledge above all else. And let's talk about Hypatia's contributions to science and philosophy. Her work in mathematics and astronomy laid the groundwork for future discoveries. She didn't just add to the sum of human knowledge, she multiplied it. Her improvements on the astrolabe, for instance, made navigation more precise and paved the way for explorations that would eventually connect continents. Her influence on Neoplatonism, a philosophical system that sought to reconcile the material and the spiritual, encouraged a way of thinking that valued both empirical evidence and metaphysical inquiry. As we sift through the layers of history, it's easy to get caught up in the allure of the legend. But the real Hypatia was a person of flesh and bone, intellect and passion. Her legacy is a testament to the power of ideas to transcend time and place. She reminds us that the pursuit of knowledge is a noble endeavor, fraught with challenges but rich with rewards. And while we may never fully disentangle the myth from the reality, we can appreciate the enduring impact of her life and work. So, what do we take away from all this? Perhaps it's the idea that learning isn't just about accumulating facts. It's about challenging assumptions and expanding horizons. Maybe it's the reminder that resilience is as much about persistence as it is about adaptability. Or it could be the simple truth that while history often turns people into legends, it's the real stories, the ones that acknowledge both the brilliance and the imperfections, that teach us the most. Hypatia's story, with all its complexities, invites us to consider our own legacies. How will we be remembered? As myth or as reality? As dreamers of dreams or as doers of deeds? In the end, perhaps Hypatia's greatest legacy is the encouragement to remain curious, to question the world around us, and to pursue knowledge for its own sake. After all, as she might have said, the universe is a vast, mysterious place, and understanding it is the greatest adventure of all. And with that thought, dear listener, we conclude our journey through the life and legacy of Hypatia, a woman who, in both life and death, taught us the value of inquiry and the power of the human mind. Harriet Beecher Stowe's story begins not with the fame of a best-selling author, but in the quaint, bustling town of Litchfield, Connecticut, where she was born in 1811. Think of Litchfield as your classic New England village, complete with charming cobblestone streets and an array of church steeples pointing accusingly at the heavens. Her father, Lyman Beecher, was a firebrand preacher with a penchant for stirring the pot, sort of like if John the Baptist had a Twitter account with a strong opinion on everything from sin to slavery. The Beecher household was like the original reality TV show, minus the cameras, and with a bit more theology. With 13 children, it was a hive of intellectual and moral activity. Imagine family dinners where the main course was a side of fervent debate, garnished with a sprinkle of sibling rivalry. Lyman was a Calvinist minister who believed in divine intervention almost as much as he believed in a good argument. In this environment, Harriet was marinated in discussions of social justice and reform, like a tofu soaking up the flavors of moral responsibility. Her father's sermons on abolition and temperance were the soundtrack of her childhood. Lyman wasn't just a man of the cloth. He was more like a man of the megaphone, rallying against the injustices of his time with all the subtlety of a firework display in a library. But let's not kid ourselves. Growing up in such a household wasn't all earnest discussions and moral high grounding. There was also an element of chaos, as you'd expect with that many kids under one roof. Picture Lyman trying to pen a sermon while one child is practicing the violin horribly off-key, another is reciting Latin conjugations, and a third is loudly questioning the ethics of meat consumption. It's no wonder Harriet developed a keen sense of observation and a sharp wit, survival tactics in a family like hers. As Harriet grew, so did her exposure to the issues that would later fuel her writing. The Beecher family was deeply embedded in the social reform movements of the day. If there was a meeting, rally, or protest, you could bet a Beecher was there, probably giving a speech, or at least loudly agreeing with one. Harriet absorbed these discussions like a sponge, developing her own ideas about slavery and justice. By the time she was a teenager, Harriet had already moved beyond the typical concerns of the era's young women, marriage prospects and embroidery, into the world of ideas and change. She was educated at the Litchfield Female Academy, where she didn't just learn the genteel arts of a lady, but also honed her skills in rhetoric and argument. This wasn't your ordinary finishing school. It was more like a boot camp for future rabble-rousers. It's important to note that Harriet wasn't just a passive observer in this whirlwind of reformist zeal. She had a front-row seat to the kind of grassroots activism that's often romanticized, but rarely understood in all its gritty complexity. The abolitionist movement, in particular, was not just about genteel discussions over tea, but about real, palpable danger and societal upheaval. In the Beecher's world, fighting for the end of slavery wasn't a hobby. It was a calling, and it was fraught with risk. Harriet's early exposure to the abolitionist movement was instrumental in shaping her worldview. By the time she put pen to paper to write Uncle Tom's Cabin in 1851, she was drawing on decades of observation and engagement. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's savor the notion that Harriet's upbringing was a crucible of intellectual and moral challenge. In the Beecher household, the question wasn't whether you would do something about the injustices of the world, but how you would go about doing it. Her father's influence was undeniable. Lyman Beecher was like the Energizer Bunny of social reform, always on the move and perpetually charged up. He would later become the president of Lane Theological Seminary in Cincinnati, Ohio, a long way from Litchfield, but a stone's throw in spirit. Harriet's exposure to his fiery sermons and debates was akin to having a front-row seat in a perpetual TED talk, with the added drama of potential divine retribution. The absurdity and the gravity of the times were not lost on young Harriet. She understood the stakes involved in the movement she observed and later participated in. Her upbringing in Connecticut was more than just a backdrop. It was the forge in which her ideas were tempered. It was here that she learned how to wield the power of words as weapons, tools, and bridges. And so, the stage was set for Harriet Beecher Stowe, a woman who would one day shake the foundations of a nation with her narrative prowess. But before she changed the world, she had to survive the intellectual boot camp that was her family home. In Litchfield, amidst the din of debate and the clamor for justice, a young girl was quietly shaping the voice that would echo through history. So, fresh out of the intellectual forge that was the Beecher household, Harriet Beecher Stowe found herself heading to the bustling frontier city of Cincinnati, Ohio, in 1832. And let me tell you, Cincinnati was no Litchfield. If Litchfield was a quaint New England village with a penchant for debating the finer points of morality, Cincinnati was like the Wild West of intellectual and social discourse, minus the tumbleweeds, but with plenty of riverboats. Sitting on the north bank of the Ohio River, Cincinnati was a mere hop, skip, and a paddle away from Kentucky, a state where slavery was legal and bustling. Talk about living on the edge, literally. Harriet moved to Cincinnati at the tender age of 21, when her father, Lyman Beecher, took the helm at Lane Theological Seminary. It was a family relocation that turned into a front-row seat to the American antebellum drama. Picture this, a city teeming with the energy of expansion, commerce, and a whiff of the contentious issue of slavery wafting in from the South. If you ever wondered where Harriet got her up-close and personal view of slavery, Ohio was the reality check she never knew she needed. Cincinnati was a hotbed of abolitionist fervor, and the Lane Seminary, under Lyman's fiery leadership, was its intellectual epicenter. But let's not pretend that it was all scholarly debates and genteel tea parties. No, this was a place where ideologies clashed like titans. In fact, the Lane Debates of 1834, a series of 18 days of passionate discussions on abolition, were so intense they practically set the seminary aflame with controversy. The debates were groundbreaking enough to lead a group of students to break away and form Oberlin College, a radical move that embraced co-education and racial inclusivity. Talk about putting your beliefs where your books are. For Harriet, living in Cincinnati meant living a stone's throw from slavery's reality. This wasn't just a geographical proximity, but a moral proximity too. She encountered escaped slaves who crossed the river into Ohio, seeking the promise of freedom that seemed tantalizingly close, yet perilously far away. These encounters were a sobering reminder that the abstract discussions from her Litchfield days had real, human faces. The stories she heard from these individuals would let her find a voice in her writing, forming the emotional backbone of Uncle Tom's Cabin Asterisk. But let's not sugarcoat Harriet's time in Cincinnati. It was also a period of juggling the everyday chaos of a growing family. Harriet married Calvin Stowe, a professor at Lane, in 1836, and over the years they had 7 children. 7. If the Beecher family dinners were a circus, Harriet's own home was a 3-ring affair of its own. Imagine writing while simultaneously making sure your toddler doesn't try to eat the ink. It's a wonder she managed to write at all, let alone pen the book that would shake the world. And speaking of shaking, the Stowe household was no stranger to financial earthquakes. Academic salaries were about as stable as a Jenga tower in a windstorm, and Harriet's writing was as much a financial necessity as it was a calling. Her literary career began with magazine articles and short stories, which were, let's be honest, not exactly paying the bills. But it was a start, and it kept the ink flowing and the imagination churning. Yet the economic struggles were nothing compared to the ideological battles raging around her. Cincinnati was a city divided, a microcosm of the national tension between North and South. Harriet found herself straddling these worlds, with one foot in the free North and the other in the shadow of the slave-holding South. It was a precarious position, one that demanded both courage and cunning. One can only imagine the dinner-table conversations at the Stowe household, with Harriet and Calvin dissecting the day's news, perhaps while a child or two tried to see if peas could fly. These discussions, though, were more than intellectual exercises. They were the cauldron in which Harriet's future literary masterpiece simmered. The tales of escaped slaves she heard, combined with the moral outrage she felt, were the raw materials she would later refine into a story that would ignite the conscience of a nation. While Cincinnati was a crucible of ideas and ideologies, it was also a place of contradictions. The city was a booming trade center, thanks to its prime location along the river. It was also a city that profited from the very institution many of its residents abhorred. Goods produced by slave labor flowed through its markets, a stark reminder of the economic entanglements that made abolition more than just a moral issue. It was a financial one too. And then there was the social scene. Harriet navigated a world of salons and gatherings where the topic of the day was as likely to be the latest fashion as it was the latest outrage against humanity. It was an era preoccupied with appearances, both literally and metaphorically. Yet, beneath the societal veneer, the undercurrents of change were palpable, and Harriet was keenly aware of them. In this dynamic environment, Harriet honed her narrative skills, learning to weave the personal with the political, the mundane with the monumental. Her writing began to reflect the complexity of the world around her, capturing the nuances of a society on the brink of seismic change. She was more than a chronicler of her times. She was an interpreter, a translator of human experience into the language of literature. As the years rolled by, Cincinnati became more than just a backdrop to Harriet's life. It was a catalyst, a place that pushed her to confront the realities of slavery with a clarity and urgency that would later define her most famous work. The stories she gathered during her Ohio years were not just stories, they were testimonies, evidence that demanded to be heard. So, while Cincinnati might have been a world away from Litchfield in terms of its social fabric, it was precisely this contrast that provided Harriet with the insights she needed to craft a narrative that would resonate far beyond the Ohio River. Her time in Cincinnati was not just a chapter in her life. It was the prelude to a story that would echo through the ages, challenging a nation to look in the mirror and question its soul. But let's not jump to conclusions just yet. Harriet's story is far from over, and the tale of how she came to write Uncle Tom's Cabin is one that involves not just personal transformation, but a national reckoning. So stay tuned, because the journey from Cincinnati to the pages of history is one that promises to be as compelling as the woman herself. With Cincinnati as her bustling backdrop, Harriet Beecher Stowe was on a collision course with history, and it all started with the modest idea of writing a serialized novel. Yep, serialized, because in the days before Netflix, people got their cliffhangers from magazines. Enter the National Era a Washington, D.C.-based abolitionist newspaper that in 1851 offered Stowe a platform to publish a story about the brutal realities of slavery. Harriet wasn't just dipping her quill into ink. She was about to stir the pot of a nation simmering with tension. The story, which would become Uncle Tom's Cabin began its life not as a grand tome, but as a series of bite-sized narratives, kind of literary tapas, if you will. Over the course of 40 installments, Stowe wove a tale that was as gripping as it was controversial. Each episode was like a carefully timed theatrical release, keeping readers on the edge of their seats, eagerly awaiting the next installment. It was the 1850's equivalent of a viral TikTok series, complete with societal impact and emotional investment. Now, let's talk numbers, because what's a blockbuster without a box office? When the serialized novel hit the stands, it was an instant sensation. By 1852, the complete book was published and sold 300,000 copies in the United States within its first year, a staggering figure for the time, considering the U.S. population was just over 23 million. To put that in perspective, it's like selling 3 million copies today. And it wasn't just Americans who were hooked. Across the pond, the Brits went mad for it too, with over 1 million copies sold in the United Kingdom. This runaway success was both a blessing and a logistical nightmare for Stowe, whose household was already a circus of chaos and creativity. Imagine managing a burgeoning literary career while juggling 7 kids, each as demanding as a tabloid editor. If Harriet thought Cincinnati was bustling, her life post Uncle Tom's Cabin was a full-blown 3-ring circus, complete with fan mail, public appearances, and the inevitable backlash. Speaking of backlash, not everyone was ready to sing the book's praises. In the South, Uncle Tom's Cabin was about as welcome as a snowstorm in July. Southern critics lambasted it as an exaggeration, accusing Stowe of painting an unfair picture of the institution they so desperately clung to. Some even published their own, let's say, alternative facts in the form of pro-slavery novels that aimed to counteract her narrative. Suddenly, Stowe found herself at the center of a literary civil war, with pens drawn on both sides. But why all the fuss? What made Uncle Tom's Cabin explode onto the scene with such ferocity? Well, for starters, Stowe did something radical. She gave slavery a human face. Her characters were not mere caricatures, but complex individuals whose stories tugged at the heartstrings of readers. By weaving personal narratives with the harsh realities of slavery, she transformed what was often an abstract political debate into a deeply personal moral crisis. It was like pulling back the curtain on a well-maintained facade, revealing the rot beneath. And that's precisely what fueled the abolitionist movement. Stowe's work didn't just reflect the mood of the nation, it helped shape it. Her novel became a rallying cry for those advocating for the end of slavery, galvanizing a movement that was gaining momentum but needed a catalyst. The book's impact was so profound that when Abraham Lincoln supposedly met Harriet Beecher Stowe, he reportedly remarked, "So you're the little woman who wrote the book that started this great war." Whether or not Honest Abe actually said it is up for debate, but the sentiment speaks volumes about the book's cultural impact. Now, let's debunk a myth that still lingers like a ghost at a literary feast. The idea that Stowe's work was purely altruistic. While her moral compass undoubtedly pointed north, there was also a pragmatic side to her writing. Remember those financial earthquakes we talked about? Well, writing was Harriet's way of securing her family's financial future. Yes, she was driven by a desire for social justice, but she also had mouths to feed and bills to pay. Being a moral crusader doesn't exempt one from the realities of economic survival, a fact often glossed over in romantic retellings of her story. Let's not forget the logistical madness her success unleashed. Picture Harriet's home inundated with letters from admirers, critics, and everyone in between. Correspondence came in faster than she could respond, and her presence was in demand at events and rallies across the country. It's hard to imagine how she managed to keep her head above water amidst all the frenzy. Maybe she had a secret stash of 19th century energy drinks, or maybe it was sheer determination and a dash of chaos-induced adrenaline. Unsurprisingly, not everyone who read Uncle Tom's Cabin was moved to action or sympathy. The novel faced fierce opposition, particularly in the South, where it was banned in several states. Copies were burned, and Stowe was vilified in the press. Yet, like any good story, the controversy only fueled interest. The more people talked about it, the more copies flew off the shelves, and the more the conversation about slavery intensified. It was the Streisand effect of the 1800. As for Harriet, she remained unflappable, continuing to write and engage with the world around her. She wasn't just a one-hit wonder. She went on to publish more than 30 books, encompassing a range of genres from novels to poetry to travel memoirs. But none would ever reach the cultural zenith of Uncle Tom's Cabin *. It was a phenomenon that transcended the written word, becoming a symbol of a nation grappling with its conscience. And so, the story of Harriet Beecher Stowe and her infamous novel continues to echo through history, a testament to the power of words to ignite change. As we leave this chapter, it's clear that Harriet's tale is far from over. Her work wasn't just a literary milestone, it was a seismic shift in the cultural landscape, setting the stage for the tumultuous years that would follow. Stay tuned, because the journey from page to revolution is one that's only just begun. As Harriet Beecher Stowe's narrative prowess unfurled through Uncle Tom's Cabin it was like tossing a lit match into the dry tinder of American public opinion. The book didn't just sit on the shelf gathering dust. It was a living entity, crawling into the collective consciousness and demanding attention. It became the must-read of its time, a literary phenomenon that transcended its pages to ignite debates that were long overdue. Imagine book clubs of the 1850 with folks sitting around, sipping tea, and wrestling with the uncomfortable truths Stowe presented. This was no mere parlor trick. It was a cultural earthquake. Now, let's talk about the political aftershocks. In the North, Uncle Tom's Cabin gave abolitionists the megaphone they desperately needed. It was like handing them a social media platform with an infinite character count. The book's emotional pull was undeniable. People couldn't ignore the moral urgency it presented. It galvanized those who were on the fence about slavery, turning passive sympathizers into active participants in the abolitionist cause. It was as if Harriet had whispered to the nation, "Wake up and smell the injustice." And wake up they did. The economic implications were just as profound. In the southern states, where the economy was as entwined with slavery as a pair of earbuds in a pocket, the book was nothing short of heretical. Cotton, tobacco, and sugar were the cash crops that fueled southern wealth, and the labor of enslaved people was the engine driving this prosperity. To challenge slavery was to challenge the very foundation of southern economics. The book's publication felt like an existential threat, and the South reacted with the fervor of a hornet's nest poked by a stick. Let's crunch some numbers to understand the stakes. By the mid-19th century, the American South produced about 75% of the world's cotton supply. The U.S. economy was so reliant on this white gold that it constituted around 60% of American exports. The financial entanglements were as deep as they were lucrative, and any threat to this delicate balance was met with vehement opposition. Southern newspapers branded Stowe as a menace, while pro-slavery advocates scrambled to publish counter-narratives. It was the original spin zone, with each side vying for control of the narrative. And then there's the myth that Uncle Tom's Cabin single-handedly started the Civil War. It's a romantic notion, the kind that makes for a snappy headline, but the reality is more nuanced. The book certainly played a role in heightening tensions, but it was more like a catalyst in a chemical reaction that had been simmering for decades. The real story is a tangled web of economic interests, political blunders, and deep-seated social divides. Harriet's novel added fuel to a fire that was already burning, illuminating the chasm between North and South in stark relief. The myth persists, though, because it offers a tidy explanation for a complex conflict. It's easy to imagine Abraham Lincoln, in his top hat and stovepipe charm, meeting Stowe and quipping about her being the cause of the war. But the truth is, the seeds of conflict were sown long before Stowe ever put pen to paper. The Missouri Compromise of 1820, the Compromise of 1850, and the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 were all legislative band-aids on a gaping wound. The question of slavery's expansion into new territories was the real tinderbox, and Uncle Tom's Cabin was the spark that exposed the raw edges. Back in the North, the book's success translated into tangible momentum for abolitionists. Organizations devoted to ending slavery saw their membership ranks swell. It was as if Stowe had handed them a rallying cry, and they were eager to answer. The Underground Railroad, already a lifeline for those escaping bondage, gained new vigor as more people offered their homes and resources to aid fugitives heading north. The book didn't just tell a story, it inspired action. As for Harriet, she continued to ride the whirlwind she had unleashed. She became an unlikely celebrity, her life a blur of lectures and public appearances. Imagine the 19th century version of a press junket, minus the latte runs, but with all the pressure of maintaining one's public image. Of course, the scrutiny was intense, but Stowe handled it with the aplomb of someone who had grown up in the Beecher crucible. She wasn't just talking the talk, she was walking the walk, advocating for justice at every turn. Not surprisingly, Uncle Tom's Cabin also prompted a literary arms race. Southern writers churned out pro-slavery novels at a frenetic pace, trying to tip the scales back in their favor. These works, often dubbed anti-Tom literature, aimed to paint a rosier picture of plantation life. They were the PR campaigns of their day, desperate attempts to counter Stowe's narrative with tales of contented enslaved people and benevolent masters. But the damage was done. Stowe's story had already captured the public's imagination. Meanwhile, the political landscape was shifting. The 1850 were a tumultuous decade in American politics, with the formation of the Republican Party in 1854, born from anti-slavery sentiment and the desire to curb the spread of slavery into the territories. By the time Abraham Lincoln was elected in 1860, the stage was set for conflict. His election was the final straw for the South, who saw his presidency as a direct threat to their way of life. The secession of southern states followed, and the Civil War loomed on the horizon. It's tempting to cast Harriet Beecher Stowe as the sole architect of this upheaval, but the truth is, she was one voice in a cacophony of dissent. Her work amplified the calls for change, making the moral case against slavery impossible to ignore. In doing so, she helped build the momentum that would eventually lead to the war's outbreak. But to give her all the credit or blame is to oversimplify a complex tapestry of historical forces. In the end, Uncle Tom's Cabin was a mirror held up to a nation, forcing it to confront its moral failings. It was a cultural phenomenon, a call to action, and a testament to the power of storytelling. Harriet Beecher Stowe may not have single-handedly started the Civil War, but she certainly gave it a voice, one that echoes through history with a resonance that refuses to fade. As the nation stood on the brink of war, her words served as both a reflection and a challenge, a reminder that the pen, indeed, could be mightier than the sword. As the echoes of Uncle Tom's Cabin reverberated through the tumultuous corridors of history, Harriet Beecher Stowe's life took on an even more complex tapestry. Let's not pretend the spotlight dimmed after the Civil War. It simply shifted focus. Harriet continued to wield her pen like a seasoned conductor, orchestrating symphonies of activism and advocacy well into her later years. She didn't just ride into the proverbial sunset. She charged headlong into it, quill raised high, as if chasing the sun itself. Even after the war, Harriet wasn't about to rest on her laurels or her royalties. While the nation grappled with the messy business of Reconstruction, she stayed active, writing not just for the sake of art, but as a tool for societal critique. She was like the social justice warrior of her time, minus the hashtags, but with all the fervor. Over the years, she published more than 30 books, dabbling in everything from travel memoirs to theological essays, proving that she was more than a one-hit wonder. If you thought Harriet was just a literary firebrand, think again. She was a veritable Swiss Army knife of the written word. But let's not sugarcoat her legacy. Harriet's post-war writings often treaded into controversial waters. Her 1869 book, Old Town Folks*, delved into the cultural and religious dynamics of New England life. It was like a nostalgic stroll down memory lane, but not without its barbs and critiques. Then there was Lady Byron, Vindicated *, published in 1870, where she leapt into the deep end by defending Lady Byron against allegations of infidelity and abuse from her famous husband, Lord Byron. Imagine stepping into a celebrity feud from the past. Harriet was like a 19th century tabloid journalist, digging up the dirt and serving it with a side of righteous indignation. Her foray into the Byron controversy was met with mixed reviews, to say the least. Some called her bold, others thought she was meddling in affairs best left buried. It was a reminder that even icons can stumble into murky waters. But Harriet wasn't one to shy away from a challenge, even if it meant weathering a storm of public opinion. And let's face it, her life was a series of calculated risks, from tackling slavery to taking on the romanticized legends of dead poets. Now, let's talk about the myth-busting reality of her legacy. While Harriet is often lauded as a catalyst for social change, it's crucial to acknowledge the complexities of her impact. Uncle Tom's Cabin did humanize the plight of enslaved people for many readers, but it also perpetuated stereotypes that lingered uncomfortably in American culture. The character of Uncle Tom, for instance, became a double-edged sword, an icon of endurance for some, yet a symbol of subservience for others. It's a classic case of unintended consequences, where a well-meaning narrative morphs into a cultural caricature. Yet, despite these complexities, Harriet's contributions to literature and social justice remain undeniable. Her work illuminated the darkest corners of American society, forcing a reckoning that was both necessary and painful. It's like she held up a mirror to a nation, compelling it to confront its own reflection, warts and all. And while some might criticize her for the simplifications in her storytelling, others recognize the power of her narratives to spark conversations and drive change. As Stowe aged, she continued to defy the expectations of her era. She wasn't content to fade into the background. Instead, she became a vocal advocate for women's rights and education. She was like the Susan B. Anthony of literature, championing causes with the same determination she had applied to abolition. Her advocacy extended beyond the written word. She was a frequent speaker at public events, engaging audiences with her sharp wit and unwavering conviction. Harriet understood the power of words, not just on paper, but spoken aloud, resonating with those who were ready to challenge the status quo. In her later years, Harriet settled in Hartford, Connecticut, where she enjoyed the fruits of her labor with a comfortable lifestyle, a testament to her literary success. But retirement was a foreign concept to Harriet. Even as her health declined, she remained intellectually engaged, corresponding with friends and admirers, and offering her insights on the issues of the day. It was as if her mind was an ever-turning wheel, churning out ideas and reflections until the very end. Harriet Beecher Stowe passed away in 1896 at the ripe age of 85, leaving behind a legacy that continues to spark debate and reflection. Her final years were marked by a sense of fulfillment, knowing that her life's work had left an indelible mark on American history. But let's not romanticize her story too much. Harriet was a woman of her time, with views and beliefs shaped by the era she lived in. While she was progressive in many ways, she was also a product of her cultural environment, a reminder that even pioneers are not immune to the limitations of their context. Today, Harriet's story is remembered with a blend of admiration and scrutiny. She's celebrated for her courage and criticized for her oversights. Her life serves as a complex tapestry of triumphs and challenges, a narrative that refuses to be neatly categorized. It's like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. Harriet defied the confines of any single narrative, her legacy as multifaceted as the stories she penned. In the annals of history, Harriet Beecher Stowe stands as a testament to the power of storytelling to reshape the world. Her life was a masterclass in the art of wielding words as both a shield and a sword, challenging the status quo and demanding change. As we reflect on her legacy, we are reminded that change rarely comes from a single voice, but from a chorus of voices, each contributing to the symphony of progress. Harriet's voice was one such note, resonating across time, a reminder that the pen can indeed be mightier than the sword, but only if wielded with purpose and conviction. And so, dear listeners, we close the chapter on Harriet Beecher Stowe, a woman whose story continues to captivate and challenge us. As we tuck this tale into the folds of history, let's carry forward the lessons it imparts, the courage to speak out, the wisdom to listen, and the determination to forge a better future. In the end, Harriet's legacy is not just about the books she wrote, but the conversations she started and the world she dared to imagine. And that, my friends, is a story worth remembering. You're standing knee-deep in the mud, shovel in hand, cursing your luck that you weren't born into a family of bakers or blacksmiths. Instead, you're a medieval grave digger, and let's just say it's not quite the glamorous gig that the history books, or Hollywood, might have you believe. Forget any notions of knights and chivalry. This is the gritty underbelly of the Middle Ages, where your day-to-day reality involves a whole lot of dirt, sweat, and let's be honest, bones. First things first, let's talk about the job itself. Grave digging in the medieval period was, quite literally, a dead-end job. You'd be out there, rain or shine, hacking away at the earth with tools that seemed like they'd been around since the dinosaurs. I mean, we're talking wooden spades with iron tips here, not exactly the high-tech gear you might hope for when faced with a 6-foot-deep hole. The labor was back-breaking, and if you think your modern-day gym workout is tough, try swinging a pickaxe all day long while wearing woolen clothes that weigh more than a small child. Now, let's not pretend you're doing this for the money. As a grave digger, you might have been raking in a whopping 3 pennies a day. That's right, 3 whole pennies. In today's terms, that might buy you a cup of coffee, if you're lucky. To put it in perspective, a laborer's wage in the late Middle Ages was about 1 penny per day, so you're slightly ahead of the game. But considering the cost of living, you'd have to dig a lot of graves to afford even the basics. Bread alone could cost you a halfpenny a loaf, and don't even think about splurging on meat or ale too often unless you enjoy living on the financial edge. So why would anyone in their right mind choose this profession? Well, the answer is simple. Not many did. Often, grave digging fell to those who had few other options. Maybe you were an orphan, or perhaps your family owed a debt that couldn't be repaid in any other way. The truth is, society didn't exactly roll out the red carpet for grave diggers. You were seen as a necessary evil, handling the dead so the living didn't have to. And let's face it, being surrounded by corpses wasn't exactly the fast track to social success. And if the physical demands and lousy pay weren't enough, there was also the delightful risk of disease. The Black Death, anyone. As a grave digger, you were on the front lines of the plague. While others fled to the countryside to escape the pandemic, you stayed put, wielding your shovel like a medieval superhero, albeit one without a cape. Handling bodies day in and day out meant your exposure to disease was higher than most. It's no wonder life expectancy wasn't exactly promising. Surviving into your 40s was practically a miracle. But let's not overlook the economic context that made this job such a raw deal. The medieval economy was as fickle as the weather, with famines and wars frequently upsetting the balance. Money was tight, and jobs were scarcer than hen's teeth. The feudal system didn't help much either. You were likely tied to a lord who cared more about his personal wealth than your well-being. And when the plague swept through, wiping out 1/3 of Europe's population, you'd think the demand for grave diggers would increase your worth. But no, the laws of supply and demand didn't quite apply when everyone was too busy panicking. So there you are, digging your way through history, one grave at a time. It's a job that's hard to romanticize, despite the allure of medieval times. The reality is harsh, and the glamour of castles and knights fades quickly when you're knee-deep in muck. Still, someone had to do it, and for better or worse, that someone was you. Keep your shovel sharp and your spirits sharper, because in this line of work, both are necessary. But let's take a detour from the grim grind of your daily life and step into the swirling fog of superstition and folklore that wrapped itself around your profession like a particularly clingy shroud. Grave digging wasn't just a job. It was a role steeped in mystery, and let's be honest, a healthy dose of medieval paranoia. You see, back in the day, people had a penchant for believing that the dearly departed could make a less-than-friendly return from the afterlife. Vampires, revenants, and all manner of undead were considered more than just bedtime stories. They were legitimate threats, according to the local gossip mill. Now, this might not be shocking news if you're a fan of horror flicks, but in the Middle Ages, the fear of the undead wasn't confined to the pages of a book or the scenes of a movie. It was a real concern, one that sometimes had you, the grave digger, caught in the crossfire. You were the first line of defense against these supernatural nuisances. The belief was that if the dead were going to rise, they'd have to dig themselves out of the grave first. And who better to notice any signs of an impending zombie apocalypse than the guy who'd recently covered them in dirt? Your community might have expected you to keep an eye out for any suspicious activity down in the cemetery. No pressure, right? If a corpse was suspected of being a bit too lively, it was your job to make sure they stayed where they were put. This could mean anything from placing stones over graves to, in some particularly superstitious locales, the good old practice of staking a body through the heart. Yeah, it was a job that required you to have a stomach for more than just the smell of fresh earth. But don't let these thrilling tales of supernatural intrigue fool you into thinking your social standing was anything but lowly. In the grand hierarchy of medieval professions, you were somewhere beneath the stable boy and only marginally above the village idiot. Why? Because your job involved handling the dead, and in a time when death was both feared and revered, that made you a bit of an outcast. The stigma surrounding your job wasn't just about the undead, though. Society viewed you through a lens of suspicion, and let's be blunt, disdain. Handling corpses was seen as a dirty task, both physically and spiritually. There was this idea that your close proximity to death somehow tainted you. You were the personification of the boundary between life and death, a role that didn't make you many friends at the local tavern. And while you might have thought that being pivotal to the community's health and safety would earn you some respect, that wasn't the case. Instead, you were often shunned, a necessary evil in a world that desperately wanted to avoid discussing mortality. People liked their bread warm, their ale cold, and their death a distant, whispered rumor. Your presence was a reminder of the inevitable, and that's never good for party invitations. Let's not forget the economic angle here. While your pay was a pittance, the work you did was indispensable. Yet the same folks who relied on you to manage the dead and keep the living safe from supernatural shenanigans would cross the street to avoid you. It was a classic case of cognitive dissonance. They needed you, but they didn't want to acknowledge it. You were the ghost at the feast, invisible and yet ever present. And speaking of economics, let's talk about the cost of fear. In some villages, people paid extra to have their loved ones buried with protective charms, or even to have their graves watched for a few days post-burial, just in case. This was often an added responsibility for you, the grave digger, as you became the unofficial custodian of peace in the afterlife. Who knew you could have made a tidy side income if you charged a little extra for undead insurance? But let's wrap up this little tour through your day in the life before we give away too many trade secrets. The social stigma and folklore surrounding grave digging were like a fog that never quite lifted. Sure, there was a certain thrill in being the unsung hero who kept the undead at bay. And yes, your role in society was crucial, even if no one wanted to admit it. But at the end of the day, you were still the guy with dirt under his nails, and an eye out for anything that moved, 6 feet under. So as the sun sets and the fog rolls in, you pick up your shovel, ready for another day or night of thankless toil. Your work might go unnoticed, but it's etched into the very soil of history. And who knows, Maybe one day, someone will dig up the truth about the real life of a medieval grave digger. Until then, keep an eye out for anything that goes bump in the night. After all, in this line of work, you never know what might be waiting just beneath the surface. But enough about the supernatural spookiness. Let's dig into the nitty-gritty of medieval grave digging, literally. Picture yourself standing in a churchyard, your trusty wooden spade in hand. Now, don't get too attached to that spade. It's about as advanced as a rock tied to a stick. But hey, it's not like you have a Home Depot down the street. Your other indispensable tool is the pickaxe, which, unlike your spade, can actually break through the stubborn, frost-hardened earth that seems hell-bent on keeping you from your task. It's like nature itself is rooting for the dead to stay put. And why all the digging, you ask? Well, medieval burial practices were a real mishmash of tradition, religion, and the occasional logistical nightmare. In the early Middle Ages, the dead were often buried in shallow graves, with the hope that the Lord would sort out their heavenly accommodations later. By the 12th century, though, deeper graves became the norm, partly to prevent our old friends, the undead, from making an unsolicited encore. Plus, the church decreed that the body should rest in peace until Judgment Day, which, by medieval standards, was probably next Tuesday. Now, you might think that graveyards were peaceful places, but during the plague years, they were anything but. Quick burials were the order of the day to prevent the spread of disease. We're talking mass graves, folks, pits filled with bodies, hastily dug and even more hastily filled. It was grim work, and the demand for grave diggers shot through the roof, although, as we've established, this didn't exactly translate into a pay raise. As you can imagine, digging in a medieval cemetery wasn't just about finding a nice spot for Uncle Geoffrey. You had to navigate around existing graves, and heaven help you if you accidentally unearthed someone's long-lost relative. Grave markers were often wooden, prone to rotting away, leaving you with nothing but educated guesses about who, or what, you might find below. It's like playing a morbid game of Minesweeper, minus the computer, and with a whole lot more dirt. Not only did you have to contend with the physical demands of grave digging, but there were logistical challenges galore. Graveyards weren't exactly planned with the precision of a modern city grid. During the height of the plague, burial ground space became a hot commodity. Cities like London saw their cemeteries filled to capacity, forcing people to get creative. Some even resorted to burying their dead in fields or forests, basically anywhere not already teeming with corpses. It's not quite the eternal rest one might hope for, but desperate times call for desperate measures. And let's talk about the evolution of burial practices. By the late Middle Ages, people started to get fancy with their funerals. Coffins became popular among those who could afford them, adding a touch of dignity to the whole affair. But if you were poor, well, you might go straight into the ground with just a shroud for company. The church, of course, had its say in all this, with burial fees and the expectation of a proper Catholic ceremony. In many cases, these fees were more than a grave digger's weekly wage. Talk about adding insult to injury. Now, let's bust some myths about medieval funerals. Forget the idea that everyone was buried with grave goods like some Viking king. While it's true that earlier Anglo-Saxon burials might have included personal items, by the Middle Ages, the church frowned upon this practice. The focus was on the soul, not worldly possessions. So, unless you were someone of importance, like a monarch or a saint, your grave was likely as bare as your pockets. But why all the fuss about burial anyway? Well, in a time when medicine was more guesswork than science, ensuring a proper burial was seen as crucial for the soul's journey to the afterlife. This belief was deeply rooted in Catholic doctrine, which held that the body should be treated with respect, even in death. Not that this made your job any easier, but at least it provided a sense of purpose beyond the muck and mire. As a grave digger, you were smack dab in the middle of these evolving practices. Your job was to adapt on the fly, whether that meant digging deeper graves, accommodating coffins, or simply finding space in an overcrowded cemetery. It was a logistical puzzle wrapped in a shroud of dirt and decay. But let's not romanticize this too much. The reality of medieval grave digging was less about the glory of eternal rest and more about managing a never-ending to-do list of death. It was a dirty, thankless job, but someone had to do it. And as you leaned on your spade, watching the sun dip below the horizon, you could at least take solace in the fact that, for now, the dead were staying put. So, as you hang up your shovel for the night, remember that history may have forgotten your name, but your work was carved into the very fabric of medieval life. You were the last line of defense against the chaos that lay just beneath the surface, and while you might not have had the tools or the recognition you deserved, you kept the wheels of medieval society turning. Keep your wits about you, because in this job, the past is always just a shovel's length away. Now, as you dust off your hands and consider the next hole you'll dig, it's time to dive into the murky waters of political and religious influences that shaped your daily grind. You see, in medieval times, grave digging wasn't just about moving dirt. It was a chess game played on a board of churchyards, with the church itself holding most of the pieces. First up, let's talk about the big boss, the Catholic Church. This powerhouse institution wasn't just concerned with saving souls. It was also deeply involved in how those souls were laid to rest. The church had its fingers in every pie, dictating who, when, and where people could be buried. Ever hear of consecrated ground? That's real estate blessed by a priest, and it's prime property for the dearly departed. If you weren't buried there, well, your afterlife prospects weren't looking great. And the church didn't just stop at blessing the ground. Oh no. They were the medieval version of city planners, deciding how cemeteries were laid out, down to the last plot. Grave diggers like you had to play by their rules. They decided which way bodies faced, usually east, towards Jerusalem, and even reserved the best spots around the church for the wealthy and influential. So, if you were a mere peasant, your eternal rest might be in the cemetery's nosebleed section, far from the hallowed walls of the church. Now, if you thought the church's influence was purely spiritual, think again. It was also an economic juggernaut. Burial fees were a significant revenue stream, and the church milked it for all it was worth. Want a prime spot near the altar? That'll cost you a lot. We're talking fees that could exceed a grave digger's monthly wage. And should you fail to pay up, well, your final resting place might be a bit less. Restful. Talk about adding a final insult to injury. But what about the political climate? That's where things get interesting. Let's rewind to the 14th century, enter the Black Death, stage left. This bubonic party crasher swept across Europe like a medieval rock band on tour, and grave diggers were suddenly the most in-demand gig in town. The plague didn't just double or triple burial demands, it multiplied them by tenfold. Entire towns were decimated, and you were there, shovel in hand, trying to keep up with a tidal wave of mortality. As the plague ravaged communities, the church found itself in a bind. On the one hand, they held firm to their burial practices, insisting on consecrated ground and proper rites. On the other hand, they were overwhelmed. The sheer volume of deaths meant that traditional burial practices had to be, shall we say, expedited. Mass graves became the norm, and the usual pomp and circumstance of a Catholic burial took a backseat to practicality. It was a grim necessity, but necessity nonetheless. This brings us to a not-so-fun fact. During the height of the Black Death, some cities saw mortality rates soar to 60%. Imagine trying to find room for that many bodies. Paris, for example, had to expand its cemeteries beyond the city walls, creating new burial grounds to accommodate the influx. The pressure on grave diggers was immense, with some working from dawn till dusk and beyond. It was a macabre assembly line, where speed was a survival tactic, not just a job requirement. But let's not forget the political maneuvering that surrounded burial practices. The church, ever the opportunist, saw an increase in its power as people turned to faith for answers and comfort. In a world beset by chaos, the church offered the promise of eternal salvation, and that came with strings attached, strings often tied to your wallet. The sale of indulgences, those little tickets to reduce time in purgatory, became a booming business, and where there was money, there was influence. Amidst this turmoil, your role as a grave digger was both cursed and coveted. You were at the center of a storm, where religious doctrine met political power, and death was the common currency. It was a job fraught with danger, both physical and spiritual. While the church wielded its influence with a heavy hand, you were left to navigate the fallout, doing the work that kept society from tipping into the abyss. And speaking of pitfalls, let's address the myth of the medieval death tax. While it sounds like something from a Monty Python sketch, the reality was less comedic. Many regions imposed taxes on burials, ostensibly to pay for the upkeep of cemeteries and the services of the clergy. In practice, it was yet another way to squeeze the living for all they were worth. So, while you toiled away in the earth, The powers that be ensured their coffers grew heavier, one grave at a time. But let's not get too bogged down in cynicism. The medieval period was a time of contradictions, where the sacred and the profane danced a complicated waltz. For every decree from the church, there was a counter-move from the populace, eager to honor their dead in their own way. Folk traditions persisted, with families sneaking impersonal items to graves despite ecclesiastical frowns. And as you cut through the dirt, you were a witness to these clashes of culture and belief. You saw firsthand how the edicts from on high mixed with the grassroots practices of everyday people. It was a landscape as rich and varied as the soil you tilled, filled with stories and secrets that would never make the history books. So, as you stand there, shovel in hand, you're not just digging graves. You're carving out a space in history, a silent testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of mortality. The political and religious forces that shaped your world were vast and complex, but at the end of the day, it was your labor that laid the foundations for both the living and the dead. And while the church might claim dominion over the afterlife, you were the one who ensured each person had a place in this world, however humble it might be. Your efforts were the invisible glue holding society together, even if no one quite wanted to admit it. So, keep digging, because the stories you uncover are the backbone of history itself, woven into the tapestry of life and death. And as the moonlight casts long shadows over the cemetery, it's time to consider just how significant your role has been in shaping the society around you. You, the medieval grave digger, the unsung hero, or perhaps anti-hero, of the Middle Ages, held a position that many would overlook but few could do without. Sure, you didn't wear armor or sing about chivalry, but you were the backbone of a community that couldn't afford to ignore the reality of death, even if they preferred not to talk about it at dinner parties. Let's be real, without grave diggers, medieval society would have been in a bit of a pickle. Picture this, a world where bodies are left to rot in the streets because no one's willing to get their hands dirty. It wouldn't just be unsightly, it would be a public health disaster. Your work in handling the dead directly impacted the living by preventing the spread of disease, and let's face it, keeping the place from smelling like a medieval morgue. You were the silent custodian of public health, ensuring that life could carry on with some semblance of normalcy. Now, the legacy of grave diggers didn't just end with a tidy cemetery. You see, the way people dealt with death back then laid the groundwork for many of the burial customs we take for granted today. The concept of consecrated ground, for instance, still lingers in the way we think about cemeteries as sacred spaces. The layouts you navigated, with bodies facing east, have evolved into the orderly grids of modern graveyards. The practices established in those muddy fields have echoed through time, influencing how we approach death and burial even now. Consider the economic implications. The medieval burial industry, humble as it was, set the stage for what today is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Funeral homes, cemetery plots, headstones, these all trace their roots back to the simple, albeit grim, tasks you performed. You could say that you were part of the original gig economy, although your gigs came with a bit more existential dread. And let's not forget the social dynamics at play. Your job may have been on the lowest rung of the social ladder, but it was indispensable. You were a living reminder of mortality, a topic that was both feared and revered. It's this duality that has intrigued people throughout the ages, sparking everything from ghost stories to philosophical debates. By dealing with death, you indirectly forced people to confront their own beliefs and fears, offering an unintentional service to the realm of existential thought. It's also worth mentioning that the way medieval society viewed death was less about personal loss and more about the communal experience. Funerals were public affairs, where the act of burying the dead was as much about the living coming together as it was about sending the departed on their way. By facilitating these gatherings, you helped reinforce community bonds, even if you were the person no one wanted to invite to dinner afterward. And yet, despite your crucial role, the stigma of handling the deceased has stuck like a stubborn stain. But let's bust a myth here. While it may seem like a lowly job, being a grave digger offered a certain level of autonomy that was rare in the medieval world. You were a free agent of sorts, not tied to the land like a serf or beholden to the whims of a guild. In a society where freedom was a luxury few could afford, you had a modicum of it, even if it came with a shovel and a sore back. Your legacy is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. In a world that often preferred to look the other way, you faced the inevitability of death head-on. You were the keeper of the threshold, ensuring that life's final transition was handled with dignity, even if the living didn't show you much respect. It's this tenacity and grit that continues to inspire, a reminder that even the most unglamorous roles can have profound importance. As we dig into the modern era, we see that your work has left an indelible mark on how we perceive and deal with death. While today's mourners might have plush funeral homes and manicured lawns, the essence remains the same, providing a space for rest and reflection. The grave digger's legacy is one of practicality meeting spirituality, a balance that has stood the test of time. So as you lay down your tools and watch the fog roll over the graveyard, know that your contribution was not buried with you. It lives on in the spaces between life and death, in the stories whispered by firelight, and in the quiet peace of a well-tended grave. Your work was the foundation upon which modern funeral practices were built, a constant reminder that even in death, there is dignity and purpose. In the end, you weren't just digging graves, you were digging into history itself. And as the world keeps spinning, the lessons of the past remind us that every role, no matter how overlooked, has its place in the grand tapestry of human experience. So here's to you, the medieval grave digger, the unsung architect of life's final chapter. Your story may not have been written in the annals of knights and kings, but it's etched in the soil of history, where the past and the present converge. 800 AD, and you're standing on the cusp of the Arctic tundra, the kind of place that even polar bears might think twice about visiting. Welcome to a world where the sun plays hide and seek for 6 months, and the only thing colder than the ice is the welcome you'd get from a blizzard. Now, the Inuit weren't just casually strolling into this frozen expanse. They were driven by something much more primal, survival. And when you're migrating into the Arctic, you're not exactly booking a room at the Ice Palace. Nope, you're looking at a stretch of land where the only thing you can be sure of is that it's going to be unforgivingly cold. The Inuit migration patterns around this time were like nature's version of a high-stakes game of chess. They weren't just moving for the thrill of it. It was about following the caribou herds, the sea mammals, and the fish, basically the all-you-can-eat buffet of the north. They had to be flexible, constantly adapting to the whims of an environment that would just as soon kill you as look at you. And let's not forget, this was a time when the words climate change meant you might just freeze to death a little faster than expected. So how did they do it? How did they manage to not just survive, but thrive in a place where most would simply become a popsicle? The answer lies in their ingenious solutions for shelter and clothing, which were far from the quaint, romanticized igloos and fur coats of popular imagination. First off, igloos weren't just cute little snow homes. They were engineering marvels. Constructed from blocks of snow, which has the surprising property of insulating warmth, these structures could maintain inside temperatures of 60 degrees F, 15 degrees C, while it was a bone-chilling minus 40 degrees F, minus 40 degrees C outside. Not too shabby for a building material that's essentially frozen water. Then there's the clothing. Forget your trendy parkas and thermal wear. Inuit clothing was the real deal. Made primarily from caribou and seal skins, their garments were designed with a double layer, the fur facing inward on the inner layer and outward on the outer layer. This not only trapped heat, but also repelled the Arctic chill. And if you think that's impressive, consider this. The Inuit even had a solution for sweat, which, if left to freeze, could be deadly. They wore a layer of moss or grass next to the skin to wick away moisture. It's like the world's first sweat-wicking sportswear, minus the brand logo. But while the ingenuity of the Inuit is nothing short of astonishing, let's not sugarcoat the realities of Arctic living. We often hear about living in harmony with nature, but let's be real. Nature in the Arctic is more like a moody roommate who doesn't clean up after themselves and occasionally tries to murder you. The Inuit faced threats from starvation, hypothermia, and predators, not to mention the simple fact that if you didn't keep moving, you become a permanent fixture in the ice. The environment was a constant adversary. Average temperatures in the Arctic can dip as low as minus 58 degrees F, minus 50 degrees C, and the wind chill. Let's just say it's enough to make you wish you had another layer of skin. Food scarcity was a grim reality. Hunting and gathering didn't just happen when it was convenient. Sometimes it meant going days, even weeks, without a substantial meal. The concept of a balanced diet was more about what you could catch rather than a USDA-approved food pyramid. Yet in this harsh reality, the Inuit developed a profound understanding of their surroundings. They became masters of navigation, using the stars, the direction of the wind, and even the behavior of animals to guide their paths. Their knowledge of the land was so detailed that they could locate seal breathing holes in the ice, waiting patiently for an opportunity to strike. It wasn't just survival, it was survival with style. Still, the romantic notion of people living in perfect sync with nature glosses over the fact that this was an existence fraught with danger and uncertainty. The Inuit weren't just nature's buddies. They were its savvy opponents in a high-stakes game for survival. And while the legend of living in harmony is nice, the reality is that it required relentless ingenuity, adaptation, and a little bit of luck. So next time you hear about the harmonious Arctic life, remember that it was less about peace and more about a never-ending battle against the elements. In this stark landscape, the Inuit didn't just adapt, they excelled. Their innovations were born out of necessity, driven by an environment that demanded nothing less than their best. The Arctic tundra was a place where only the resourceful survived, where every decision could mean the difference between life and death. It was a world that shaped its inhabitants into some of the most resilient people on Earth, not through gentle guidance, but through relentless challenge. And as you stand on the edge of this frozen frontier, you can't help but marvel at the sheer tenacity and ingenuity of those who dared to call it home. Now, let's shimmy up close to the daily grind of an Inuit hunter. You've got to appreciate that these folks didn't just roll out of their igloos, stretch, and say, "Well, guess I'll go snag some seals today." Nope. Every hunt was a tactical operation. Think of it as Arctic special ops without the camo gear, but with a harpoon in hand, because in a place where the dinner menu doesn't include takeout, the stakes are high. First off, let's talk about the harpoon, a tool so iconic that it deserves its own spotlight. This wasn't your run-of-the-mill spear. It was the culmination of centuries of innovation. Crafted from wood, bone, or antler, the harpoon was equipped with a detachable head made from ivory or stone. Why detachable, you ask? Well, it's part of the ingenious design. When a hunter struck a seal, the head would detach and remain embedded in the prey, connected by a line to the hunter. This allowed the animal to be tracked and retrieved even if it initially escaped, a testament to Inuit engineering that would make even modern-day inventors nod in approval. Now, you might think, how hard can it be to hunt seals lounging on the ice? The answer is, extremely. Seals are the ninjas of the Arctic. They can hold their breath for up to 30 minutes and swim at speeds of 25 miles per hour. So, the Inuit hunters had to be part hunter, part patient observer. They positioned themselves near a seal's breathing hole, an opening in the ice that seals used to come up for air, and wait, sometimes for hours. Imagine the kind of patience required here. This wasn't a quick dip into the local supermarket. It was an all-day affair, and one slip-up could mean the difference between a feast and famine. But that's not all. The kayak was another masterpiece in the Inuit hunter's toolkit. Think of it as the sports car of the Arctic, sleek and built for speed. These narrow boats were constructed from driftwood or whalebone, covered with sealskin, and designed to glide silently across the water. This allowed hunters to approach sea mammals without startling them. And if you're picturing a leisurely paddle, think again. Steering a kayak required agility and a keen understanding of water currents and weather conditions. It's not exactly a Sunday row around the pond. Here's a fun fact to chew on. Inuits relied on a complex barter system long before anyone thought of dropping a stock market in New York. When a hunt was successful, it wasn't just the hunter's family that benefited. The catch was often shared within the community, reinforcing social bonds and ensuring that even those who couldn't hunt due to age or illness didn't go hungry. It's a system that would make your local co-op look a little less impressive. But let's not romanticize this too much. The truth is, hunting was not just a skill but an art form honed under the harshest conditions. The economics of hunting were brutal. A failed hunt could spell disaster. The climate was a relentless adversary, constantly shifting, making the availability of prey unpredictable. And as seasons changed, so did the challenges. In the summer, the ice would melt, and the open water made hunting more dangerous. In the depths of winter, extended darkness made navigating the icy landscape treacherous. It was as if Mother Nature had a mischievous streak, constantly upping the ante on survival. And then there's the myth of effortless abundance. This idea that the Arctic was a cornucopia of resources just waiting to be plucked. It's a cozy story, but let's be real. The Arctic wasn't running a buffet. The Inuit had to be opportunistic and resourceful, making the most of every catch. Waste was not an option. Every part of the animal was used. Meat for food, bones for tools, skins for clothing. It was a masterclass in sustainability, long before it became a buzzword in corporate boardrooms. The reality of Inuit life was gritty and demanding, a daily negotiation with an environment that didn't offer second chances. Yet, through all the challenges, there was a profound respect for the land and its creatures. The Inuit didn't view themselves as conquerors of nature, but as participants in a delicate balance, where humility and knowledge were as essential as any tool or technique. So, as you picture these hunters poised on the brink of the Arctic ice, waiting for that perfect moment to strike, remember that this wasn't just a lifestyle. It was an intricate dance with the environment, a testament to human resilience and ingenuity. And while the romance of the hunter's life is undeniable, the reality was a constant battle for survival, waged with determination, skill, and a bit of Arctic flair. This is the legacy of the Inuit hunters, a story as vast and compelling as the icy expanse they called home. Now, while the image of a lone Inuit hunter braving the frozen wilds with nothing but his trusty harpoon and a steely gaze might make for a striking postcard, it misses a crucial point. The Inuit were never truly alone. The idea of the solitary hunter is as much a myth as the notion that penguins hang out with polar bears. In reality, Inuit survival was a team effort, and the social structures within their communities were as finely tuned as the tools they crafted. Let's talk about gender roles, shall we? In the Inuit world, survival was a family affair. Men might have been the ones out hunting seals and caribou, but women were the backbone of the operation. They were the ones transforming raw materials into life-sustaining necessities. Imagine trying to thrive in the Arctic without those expertly sewn caribou skin parkas or the perfectly crafted boots known as camiet, both courtesy of the women's skillful hands. Their sewing prowess wasn't just about keeping families warm, it was about ensuring survival. A poorly made garment could mean the difference between life and frostbite. And let's not forget about the food. While the men hunted, women processed the meat and prepared it for long-term storage, a critical task when tomorrow's hunt was never a sure thing. Age, too, was more than just a number. It was a status symbol. Elders in Inuit society were the walking Wikipedias of their time. They were the keepers of knowledge, passing down invaluable survival strategies, such as how to read the weather or navigate treacherous ice flows. They taught the myths, the stories, and the practical know-how that had been honed over generations. Their wisdom was the compass that kept the community on course, even when the Arctic seemed intent on leading them astray. And let's clear up another misconception. Inuit communities didn't operate on a cutthroat, every-family-for-themselves basis. They engaged in some serious community resource sharing, an economic strategy that would make some modern socialists nod approvingly. When a hunter scored big with a seal or a whale, the catch was distributed throughout the community. It wasn't just a feel-good moment of charity, it was a practical necessity. In a land where famine was always lurking just around the corner, sharing ensured that even the sick, elderly, and less fortunate had a fighting chance. This communal approach was a social safety net long before the term was coined, and it was woven tightly with the threads of reciprocity and mutual obligation. Now, you might be thinking, but doesn't this kind of sharing lead to freeloaders? Not quite. The Inuit had social norms that discouraged laziness and encouraged contribution. Reputation was everything. If you were known for hoarding or not pulling your weight, you'd find yourself on the outside looking in when it came time to distribute the spoils of the hunt. It was a community effort, but everyone knew they had to do their part. Politically, Inuit society was a bit of an anomaly compared to the hierarchical structures seen elsewhere. Leadership was more about consensus than command. The title of leader wasn't something you campaigned for. It was earned through respect and demonstrated ability. Think of it as the ultimate meritocracy. Decisions that affected the group were made collectively, often in the communal kagik, a large snow house where meetings were held. Here, every voice could be heard, although some voices, those with more experience or strategic insight, naturally carried more weight. Inuit society also had its own unique justice system, which was more about mediation than punishment. When conflicts arose, and let's be honest, even in the tightest communities, they do, the emphasis was on restoring harmony rather than exacting revenge. In some cases, disputes were settled through song duels, where opponents would take turns insulting each other in verse. The community would judge who had the sharper wit, and the issue would be considered resolved. It's like an ancient Arctic rap battle, but with much higher stakes than street cred. This egalitarian approach was not just a quaint cultural detail, it was a survival mechanism. The Arctic environment didn't allow for dead weight, and everyone had to contribute to the group's well-being. Yet, at the same time, the community had to remain flexible and adaptable, able to respond to the ever-changing challenges thrown at them by their icy world. So while the lone hunter cutting through the Arctic wind makes for a dramatic story, it's important to remember that behind every successful hunt stood a network of individuals working together, each playing their role in a complex social structure. The Inuit were not lone wolves. They were a tightly knit pack, each member crucial to the survival of the others. In this way, the Inuit social and political systems were as vital to their survival as their technical innovations. The community was their greatest tool, one that could not be crafted from bone or sinew, but from the unbreakable bonds of family, friendship, and shared purpose. It's a lesson in collaboration and interdependence that's as relevant today as it was 1,000 years ago, proving once again that when it comes to survival, there's strength in numbers. Speaking of survival, let's dive into the heart and soul of the Inuit, their cultural and spiritual life. You might think that living in the Arctic was all about dodging frostbite and hunting seals, but the Inuit had a rich tapestry of beliefs and traditions that would make your local book club feel like a casual chat. This wasn't just about storytelling around the campfire. It was their version of Netflix, Wikipedia, and therapy session rolled into one. First, let's tackle the cliché image of the noble savage head-on. The Inuit have often been romanticized as living in some idyllic, untouched harmony with nature. But here's the kicker. Their spirituality was as pragmatic as it was profound. Their belief systems were dynamic, adapting like a polar bear on a shifting ice floe. They didn't just sit around, waiting for divine intervention. Their gods and spirits were woven into the very fabric of daily life, providing both guidance and psychological resilience in a world where you needed every ounce of both. Take Sedna, the sea goddess, for instance. Not your typical benevolent deity, Sedna was a force to be reckoned with. Her story is one of betrayal and survival, mirroring the harsh realities faced by the Inuit. She was believed to control the sea creatures, so hunters had better stay on her good side if they want to come back with more than just a cold. If the catch was poor, it wasn't just bad luck. It might mean that Sedna was displeased, and a shaman would need to intervene. The shaman, acting as a spiritual negotiator, would journey into a trance, navigating the metaphysical world to appease her. Think of it as Arctic diplomacy with a supernatural twist. And let's not forget the importance of the Angakok, or shamans, who were the spiritual leaders and healers. These folks were the spiritual rock stars, part doctor, part priest, part counselor. They didn't just wave a magic seal flipper and call it a day. Their role was as complex as it was critical, dealing with everything from physical ailments to spiritual crises. They used chants, dances, and even ventriloquism. Yes, you heard that right, to communicate with spirits. It was like a one-man Cirque du Soleil performance, but with higher stakes than just applause. Now, if you're picturing a group of stoic Inuits sitting quietly around a fire, think again. The Inuit oral tradition was lively and engaging, a living library of knowledge passed down through generations. Stories weren't just tales of heroics and guards. They were practical guides to life. They taught children how to behave, how to hunt, and how to survive. In an environment where a misstep could mean the end, these stories were as essential as a well-crafted parka. They were the original survival manuals, complete with plot twists and moral lessons. Let's talk about the myth of the Inuit as passive, peaceful people living in harmony with their environment. While there's certainly a profound respect for nature, the reality was more about surviving than singing kumbaya with the caribou. The Inuit had no illusions about the Arctic's challenges. Their spiritual beliefs weren't about submitting to nature, but about finding a way to exist alongside it, to negotiate, and sometimes to challenge it. It was less about being one with nature, and more about navigating a complex relationship with it. The Inuits' adaptability shone through in how they dealt with the changing seasons and the capricious Arctic climate. They believed that everything had a spirit, or Inua, from animals to the land itself. This belief wasn't just spiritual but practical. Respecting the animals they hunted was part of ensuring future success. Disrespect could lead to scarcity, a very tangible consequence in a place where the next meal was never guaranteed. Storytelling wasn't just a pastime, it was the bedrock of Inuit education. Forget textbooks and chalkboards. This was hands-on, ears-open learning. Through myths and legends, children learned about the dangers of wandering too far from the group, the intricacies of hunting techniques, and the moral codes that bound their communities. It's like your grandma's bedtime stories, but with a survivalist twist and a few more supernatural entities. And here's a wild thought. The Inuit didn't just believe in spirits. They believed in their own ability to influence them. The idea of humans having agency in their spiritual world is a stark contrast to many Western religious traditions. It was a belief system that placed human beings as active participants rather than passive recipients of divine will. It was about collaboration with the unseen, a dance of give and take that mirrored their earthly existence. So, while the image of the noble savage might be appealing, it misses the mark by a polar mile. The Inuit were not passive, nature-loving caricatures. They were complex, adaptable, and deeply spiritual people whose beliefs were as much about survival as serenity. Their spirituality was not a passive acceptance of fate, but a dynamic interaction with their world, both seen and unseen. In the end, the Inuit cultural and spiritual life was a testament to their resilience and adaptability. It was a sophisticated system that allowed them to navigate the uncertainties of Arctic life with confidence and purpose. Whether it was through the wisdom of their stories, the rituals of their shamans, or the respect they paid to the spirits of the land and sea, the Inuit demonstrated an enduring strength that was as vast and compelling as the icy expanse they inhabited. As we continue to unravel the threads of their rich history, remember that the Inuit story is not just one of survival against the odds, but a celebration of human ingenuity, adaptability, and the power of belief in shaping our world. And with more to explore, stay tuned as we dive deeper into this fascinating saga of resilience at the edge of the world. And so, as we continue this brisk stroll through history, let's turn our gaze to a pivotal plot twist in the Inuit saga, the arrival of Europeans. Picture this. It's the 18th century, and the Arctic isn't exactly a hotspot for tourists, unless you count the Ard explorer with a penchant for frostbite. But then, the Europeans come crashing in, bringing their ships, their goods, and their peculiar ways of doing things. This wasn't just a casual visit. It was the opening act of a drama that would forever change the Arctic landscape. Now, if you're thinking this was some kind of cultural exchange program, think again. The Europeans, armed with guns, metal tools, and an insatiable hunger for trade, were about as subtle as a walrus at a tea party. They introduced a slew of new technologies that, while handy, came with strings attached. Guns, for instance, revolutionized hunting. Seals and caribou that were once elusive targets could now be taken down from a distance, which sounds like a hunter's dream, right? But hold your applause. The introduction of firearms also meant a dependency on European traders for gunpowder and bullets, turning once self-sufficient communities into market-dependent consumers. And speaking of markets, let's talk about the fur trade. European demand for furs was insatiable, and the Inuit found themselves thrust into a global economy they hadn't exactly signed up for. Fox, otter, and seal pelts became hot commodities, with prices driven up by European fashionistas who couldn't get enough of Arctic chic. This wasn't just a wardrobe update, it was an economic upheaval. For some Inuit, this new trade brought wealth and status, but for others, it spelled disaster. Overhunting led to depletion of local wildlife, threatening the very survival of communities that had lived in balance with nature for centuries. But the Europeans weren't just content with trading goods. Oh no, they brought along their own cultural baggage, too. Cue the missionaries, with their Bibles and a determination to save souls. The introduction of Christianity was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it offered new forms of community and support. On the other, it clashed violently with traditional Inuit beliefs, leading to cultural erosion. The age-old stories and spiritual practices that had been the backbone of Inuit society were suddenly deemed pagan and primitive. It was a cultural bulldozer, flattening centuries of tradition under the guise of salvation. Yet, amid these disruptions, the Inuit proved to be master adapters. They didn't just roll over and accept change. They negotiated and assimilated what was beneficial while resisting what wasn't. Take, for instance, the adoption of European tools. Metal knives, axes, and needles were game changers. They made tasks easier and more efficient, freeing up time for other pursuits. But the Inuit didn't abandon their own methods. They integrated the new with the old, creating a hybrid culture that was as resourceful as it was resilient. And let's not forget the social dynamics at play here. European contact wasn't just about trade and technology. It was also about power and politics. The Inuit found themselves navigating a complex web of alliances and rivalries, both among themselves and with the newcomers. It was a diplomatic dance on ice, requiring a keen understanding of human nature and a strategic mindset. Some Inuit leaders rose to prominence, using their knowledge of both worlds to broker deals and assert influence. It was a time of great change, but also of great opportunity for those who could play the game. Of course, not all changes were welcomed. The introduction of alcohol, for example, had devastating effects. Whiskey and rum flowed into the Arctic like a toxic tide, bringing with it addiction and social disruption. It was a stark reminder that not all progress is positive, and that the cost of contact could be as lethal as its benefits were alluring. So, what do we make of this chapter in the Inuit story? It's a tale of survival in a new kind of wilderness, one shaped by trade, technology, and cultural confrontation. The Inuit proved once again that they were anything but passive bystanders in their own story. They adapted, innovated, and endured, continuing their legacy of resilience even as the world around them shifted like the Arctic ice. And now, as we wrap up this whirlwind tour through the frozen north, let's reflect on the legacy of the Inuit. Their history is a testament to human ingenuity and adaptability, a saga of survival against some of the harshest odds imaginable. From their ingenious shelters to their social systems, from their spiritual beliefs to their economic strategies, the Inuit have shown us what it means to live with purpose, to thrive in the face of adversity, and to maintain cultural integrity in a world that has never stopped changing. In a modern world obsessed with technological advancement and instant gratification, the Inuit remind us of the value of patience, community, and a deep connection to the land. They teach us that survival is not just about battling the elements, but about understanding and respecting the delicate balance of life. Their story is not just about enduring hardship, but about celebrating the human spirit's capacity to adapt, innovate, and persevere. As we close this chapter, let's carry forward the lessons of the Inuit. That true strength lies not in domination, but in collaboration, not in isolation, but in community, and that endurance is as much about adaptability as it is about resilience. It's a story that continues to inspire, a legacy that endures like the Arctic itself, vast, compelling, and eternally resilient. The year is 1588, and you're about to embark on a seafaring adventure that's less Pirates of the Caribbean and more the Office. 17th century Spanish edition. King Philip Roman II of Spain, a man with ambitions as vast as the Atlantic itself, has been stewing over a little spat with England. Spoiler alert. It's about power, religion, and a very long list of grievances that only seem to get longer. So, what's a king to do? Assemble the most impressive naval fleet the world has ever seen, of course. But hold your horses, or your sails, rather, because this isn't just about gallant knights and epic battles at sea. There's a lot more bureaucracy and red tape than you might expect. Forget the stuff of legends and romanticized tales of a noble crusade. In reality, this is a logistical nightmare. First, you've got a fleet consisting of a whopping 130 ships. Yep, 130. Just imagine trying to organize a family road trip with that many vehicles. The Armada is set to carry around 30,000 men, including sailors, soldiers, and officers, each with their own unique set of complaints and questionable hygiene. You don't just snap your fingers and have an Armada ready to go. Oh no, it's months of planning, which for Philip probably feels like a lifetime of filling out TPS reports. Speaking of costs, let's talk ducats. The Armada's price tag is estimated at around 10 million ducats, which is enough to make even the most spend-happy ruler break into a sweat. To put it in perspective, that's roughly equivalent to the GDP of a small country at the time. And Philip's Spain isn't exactly flush with cash after decades of wars and a declining economy. So, where does the money come from? Loans, taxes, and a little bit of praying for a miracle. Who knew global domination came with such a hefty price? Now, why is Philip so determined to take on England? It's not just a simple case of bad neighbors. This is about religious supremacy, political power, and a bit of personal vendetta. You see, England under the reign of Queen Elizabeth I is Protestant, while Spain is staunchly Catholic. Philip sees himself as a defender of the Catholic faith, and Elizabeth, well, she's that pesky Protestant thorn in his side. Add to this a bunch of piratical activities by English privateers like Sir Francis Drake, and you've got a recipe for conflict. Despite the grand visions, let's not forget the Armada is plagued by organizational chaos. Think of it as a giant game of who's in charge, where no one really knows the rules. We've got the Duke of Medina Sidonia, appointed as the commander, who, fun fact, has zero naval experience. It's like hiring a landlocked farmer to pilot a spaceship. But the Duke is loyal, and more importantly, willing, which is about as good as it gets when most others avoid the position like the plague. Or, like the actual plague. As you prepare to set sail from Lisbon, the sheer scale of operations is overwhelming. Picture the bustling docks, the sounds of hammering as ships are repaired, the shouting of orders, and the endless paperwork. The docks are a mad mix of languages, as this is a truly international affair, with ships and men from not just Spain, but also Portugal, Naples, and even the Papal States. It's a floating United Nations, minus the peacekeeping. The propaganda machine is in full swing, too. Philip wants everyone to believe this is a holy mission, a divine right to bring England back to the Catholic fold. The sailors are told tales of glory and honor, though their grumbling stomachs and unpaid wages tell a different story. It's a classic case of do as I say, not as I do, with the crown promising rewards that might never materialize. And let's talk about the ships themselves. These aren't just any old tubs. We've got galleons, hulks, and even some galleasses, armed to the teeth with cannons. But don't be too impressed yet. Many of these ships are old and slow, more suited for carrying goods than waging war. It's a bit like entering a race with a fleet of minivans. Reliable, sure, but not exactly built for speed. The real kicker. The English ships are smaller, faster, and much better suited to the choppy waters of the English Channel. So, here you are, part of this grand, albeit chaotic, venture. You're caught between the grandeur of a king's ambition and the harsh reality of logistical headaches. The winds of fate are as unpredictable as the English weather you're about to face. As the Armada finally sets sail, you can't help but wonder if this will be a glorious victory or a cautionary tale of overreaching ambition. Either way, you're in for one heck of a ride. As the Armada sails into the English Channel, you quickly realize that the romantic notion of naval conquest is about as far from reality as a sunny day in London. The Channel isn't just a body of water. It's a strategic gauntlet, a tightrope walk where one wrong move could send the entire enterprise crashing into the depths. For starters, the English are playing a different game altogether. While the Spanish Armada is a lumbering behemoth, the English fleet is more like a pack of wolves, nimble and ready to pounce. Their ships, smaller and more maneuverable, dart around like dragonflies, making it hard for the Spanish to even get a bead on them. Then there's the issue of wind, that fickle, invisible force that's either your best friend or your worst enemy. For the Spanish, it's the latter. The prevailing winds in the Channel favor the English fleet, who sail effortlessly with the breeze at their backs while the Spanish struggle, their sails flapping uselessly. You can see the frustration etched on the faces of seasoned sailors as they curse under their breath, knowing that all the grand plans in the world can't bend the weather to their will. In fact, it's like trying to win a foot race with one leg tied to a cannonball. Meanwhile, life aboard these ships is far from the swashbuckling adventures depicted in Hollywood. Imagine being crammed into a space barely large enough for a picnic, with hundreds of your closest friends, and by friends, I mean a ragtag mix of seasoned mariners, press-ganged farmers, and a few unlucky souls who drew the short straw. Hygiene is a distant concept, with the stench of unwashed bodies and rotting food, creating an ambience that no amount of salt air can mask. You start to understand why sailors have a reputation for being a bit rough around the edges. After all, a week in these conditions would make anyone long for a simple life on dry land. The crew is as diverse as a medieval UN gathering, each with their own set of skills, and more often than not, their own set of gripes. The veteran sailors are grizzled and wary, muttering about how things were different in their day, as if the ocean itself has somehow changed its temperament since they first set sail. The conscripts, on the other hand, are green and wide-eyed, wondering what they did to deserve this floating purgatory. They're the medieval equivalent of interns, tossed into the deep end with little more than a slap on the back and good luck. Communication, or lack thereof, is another thorn in the side of the Spanish Armada. In an age long before smartphones or even semaphores, conveying orders across a fleet of over 100 ships is like playing a game of telephone on a grand scale, and we all know how that ends. Messages are sent via small boats dodging cannon fire, or by using a series of flags that are easily misread. It's no wonder that orders often arrive hours late, or not at all. The Duke of Medina Sidonia, bless his landlubber heart, is doing his best, but finds himself in over his head. His naval experience is about as extensive as a goldfish in a fishbowl, and it shows. And then there's the myth of invincibility that Philip Roman II has so carefully cultivated. The Spanish Armada is supposed to be unbeatable, a divine force ordained by God himself. But reality has a way of deflating even the most pompous of balloons. The English fleet, led by the cunning Sir Francis Drake, is proving that size isn't everything. Their hit-and-run tactics are wreaking havoc, chipping away at the Armada's numbers and morale. It's a classic David and Goliath scenario, except this time, David's packing some serious firepower. The Armada's journey through the Channel is like a slow-motion car crash. You can see it coming, but there's nothing you can do to stop it. Every day brings new challenges, from unpredictable weather to dwindling supplies. Food and water are becoming scarce, and the crew's rations are cut, leading to grumbling bellies and even grumpier sailors. Disease is also a constant threat, with conditions ripe for outbreaks of scurvy and other maladies. It's a reminder that for all our lofty ambitions, we're still at the mercy of nature and our own fragile bodies. As the Armada presses on, it becomes clear that the English aren't just relying on their ships and cannons to win the day. No, they've got another ace up their sleeve: intelligence. Thanks to a network of spies and informants, Elizabeth's forces are always one step ahead, anticipating the Armada's moves like a chess master with a crystal ball. It's a game of cat and mouse, with the Spanish playing the unfortunate role of the rodent. Despite the mounting challenges, there's a certain grim determination among the Spanish sailors. They know they are part of something bigger, a grand plan to reshape the future of Europe. It's a heady mix of duty and desperation, and it drives them forward even as the odds stack against them. Yet the reality is as cold and unforgiving as the sea itself. The Armada is a juggernaut, but it's also a relic, a lumbering dinosaur in a world that's rapidly changing. This clash in the Channel is more than just a military engagement. It's a turning point in history. The outcome will shape the balance of power in Europe, influencing politics, religion, and economies for years to come. As the Spanish Armada continues its perilous journey, it's clear that victory is slipping further from their grasp. The grand vision of conquest is fading, replaced by the harsh reality of survival. The winds of fate are still blowing, and they're as unpredictable as ever. Stay tuned, because this story is far from over. As the Spanish Armada continues its perilous journey, it's clear that victory is slipping further from their grasp. The grand vision of conquest is fading, replaced by the harsh reality of survival. The winds of fate are still blowing, and they're as unpredictable as ever. Stay tuned, because this story is far from over. Now, let's wade into the chaos of battle, where the English fleet, led by Sir Francis Drake, is about to redefine naval warfare. Forget the romantic image of gentlemen dueling on the high seas. This is more like a bar brawl with cannonballs. Drake, with his trademark audacity, employs tactics that make the Spanish look like they're trying to play chess with a pigeon. He's using fire ships, yes, actual ships set ablaze and sent drifting into the Spanish formation. It's a move as crazy as it sounds, and it works like a charm. Picture this: the Spanish Armada, already struggling with coordination, now facing flaming vessels coming at them like medieval torpedoes. The ensuing panic is as palpable as the smoke filling the air. Drake's approach is nothing short of revolutionary. He's shifting the paradigm from brute force to agility and strategy. The English ships, sleek and nimble, are all about speed and maneuverability, darting around the Spanish galleons like mosquitoes at a picnic. They're armed with long-range cannons, allowing them to strike from a distance and avoid the cumbersome Spanish firepower. It's a bit like bringing a sniper rifle to a sword fight. The Spaniards, bless their hearts, are still trying to grapple with this new reality, stuck in the mindset of boarding and close combat. And let's not underestimate the weather, the great, unpredictable equalizer. The English Channel is throwing a tantrum, with winds and waves that seem to have a personal vendetta against the Spanish fleet. The gales are relentless, like nature itself is taking sides, pushing the Spanish ships off course and into disarray. It's as if the English had a secret deal with Neptune. Meanwhile, English fleet is thriving in these conditions, their smaller ships riding the waves like seasoned surfers. The psychological toll on the sailors is immense. Imagine being trapped on a floating tinderbox, surrounded by chaos, your enemies invisible until they're right on top of you. Sleep is a luxury, food is a distant memory, and the constant threat of death is as real as the salt spray on your face. The Spanish sailors are caught in a perfect storm of fear, fatigue, and futility. Morale is plummeting faster than a cannonball, and with every passing day, the dream of victory slips further from reach. Let's take a moment to interrogate the propaganda machine, that age-old art of spinning a yarn fit for the history books. The English, masters of the narrative, are already crafting a tale of heroism and divine favor. They portray themselves as the underdog, the plucky little nation standing up to the Goliath of Spain. It's a compelling story, to be sure, but the truth, as always, is more nuanced. The English fleet isn't just a ragtag band of merry men. It's a well-organized, well-funded military force with the backing of an entire nation's resources. On the flip side, the Spanish are cast as the villains, the bumbling invaders thwarted by their own hubris. Yet this caricature doesn't do justice to the sheer scale and ambition of the enterprise. The Armada is a monumental undertaking, a testament to the power and reach of the Spanish Empire at its peak. For all their flaws, the Spanish sailors are courageous, facing insurmountable odds with a resolve born of duty and desperation. Economic realities are at play here, too. War isn't cheap, and the cost of maintaining a fleet like the Armada is astronomical. The Spanish crown is hemorrhaging money, and the financial strain is felt by every sailor who hasn't seen a paycheck in months. In contrast, the English, buoyed by a savvy network of privateers and merchants, have a war chest that supports their naval exploits. It's a reminder that, in war, as in life, money often makes the difference. As the battle rages on, the English leverage not just their ships, but also their intelligence network, a web of spies and informants feeding them crucial information. It's a cloak and dagger game played out on the high seas, where knowledge is as potent a weapon as gunpowder. Sir Francis Drake, ever the opportunist, uses this to anticipate Spanish moves, staying one step ahead and turning the tide in England's favor. Yet even amidst the chaos, there are moments of humanity. Picture a Spanish sailor, exhausted and hungry, pausing to help a wounded comrade, or an English crewman, laughing with relief after a narrow escape. These fleeting glimpses of camaraderie and resilience speak to the enduring spirit of those caught in the crucible of conflict. The battles in the Channel are more than mere skirmishes. They're a turning point, signaling a shift in naval warfare that will echo through the ages. The English victory isn't just a triumph of tactics. It's a demonstration of how adaptability and innovation can overcome even the mightiest of foes. The Spanish Armada, for all its grandeur, is a relic of a bygone era, a dinosaur in a world that's rapidly evolving. As the Armada retreats, battered and broken, it leaves behind a legacy of lessons. The myth of invincibility is shattered, replaced by the harsh truth that no power, however great, is immune to the forces of nature and the ingenuity of its adversaries. The English, riding high on their success, are quick to capitalize on their newfound prestige, while the Spanish, licking their wounds, must reckon with a future uncertain. The story of the Spanish Armada is a tapestry of ambition, courage, and folly, a reminder that history is rarely black and white. It's a tale that continues to unfold, with echoes that will shape the course of nations for years to come. As we turn the page, the winds of fate blow ever onward, carrying us into the next chapter of this epic saga. Stay tuned, because the adventure is far from over. As the Armada limps away from its bruising encounter in the Channel, it's clear that the real battle now lies not with the English, but with the wrath of nature itself. You see, the plan was to regroup and resupply at Dunkirk, but thanks to those pesky English and their fire ships, the Armada's course has been dramatically altered. Instead, they're about to embark on a grueling journey around the British Isles, a journey that will make the Channel's skirmish look like a leisurely paddle in the park. As the Armada heads north, it's like stepping into a maritime horror movie, where the antagonist is Mother Nature herself. The North Atlantic, notorious for its unpredictable weather, doesn't disappoint. Picture howling winds and towering waves that toss the ships like corks in a storm. For the sailors, each day is a roll of the dice, with survival hanging on a thread as thin as their frayed sails. It's as if the ocean is exacting its own revenge on these audacious intruders. Now, let's talk about the economic fallout, because if you thought the initial 10 million ducats spent on the Armada was a financial sinkhole, the cost of this ill-fated detour is like throwing money into a black hole. Remember, Spain's coffers weren't exactly overflowing to begin with. The ongoing expenses of repairing ships, replenishing supplies, and the inevitable loss of vessels are like a slow bleed from an already open wound. Philip Roman II must be feeling the pinch like a medieval Scrooge, contemplating his dwindling ducat mountain. The human cost, though, is the real gut punch. Imagine thousands of men crammed into decrepit ships, their morale sinking faster than their vessels. Starvation is a constant companion, rations reduced to hardtack that could double as building materials and water that's more a broth of bacteria than a thirst quencher. Disease runs rampant, with scurvy making its ghastly mark on the crew. Gums bleed, teeth fall out, and limbs swell grotesquely. It's like a floating infirmary where the prescription is hope and the prognosis is grim. Shipwrecks become the tragic punctuation marks of the Armada's northern odyssey. The Scottish and Irish coastlines, rugged and unforgiving, claim ships like a collector of maritime misfortune. It's estimated that around 24 ships meet their end on these shores, the waves smashing them into splinters. Survivors who make it to land aren't exactly welcomed with open arms, either. In Ireland, many Spanish sailors find themselves at the mercy of locals more inclined to see them as invaders than refugees. For the Spanish Empire, the ripples of this disaster extend far beyond the immediate losses. The Armada's failure is a blow to Spain's prestige, a chink in the armor of what was perceived as an invincible empire. The myth of Spanish dominance is punctured, and in the vacuum, other European powers are quick to re-evaluate their positions. England, buoyed by their unexpected victory, finds itself with newfound swagger, its naval ambitions emboldened. It's the dawn of an era where the balance of power shifts like tectonic plates, setting the stage for future conflicts and alliances. Socially, the defeat sows seeds of discontent within Spain. The nobility, who poured their wealth and influence into this grand venture, are left to nurse their wounds and count their losses. The common folk, meanwhile, bear the brunt of increased taxes and economic hardship as the crown scrambles to recoup its losses. Philip's dream of a Catholic Europe is not just deferred, but decisively dashed against the rocks of reality. The implications for naval warfare are profound. The English, with their lighter, more maneuverable ships, have demonstrated the power of innovation and adaptability over sheer size and numbers. It's a lesson that will not be lost on other nations, setting off a naval arms race that will echo through the following centuries. The age of the galleon gives way to the era of the frigate, where speed and firepower take precedence over bulk and brute force. In the aftermath, the propaganda mills on both sides work overtime. In Spain, efforts are made to downplay the disaster, painting it as a heroic endeavor against impossible odds, a narrative that doesn't quite soothe the sting of defeat. Meanwhile, in England, Queen Elizabeth spin-doctors craft a narrative of divine providence, of a plucky nation under God's protection standing up to tyranny. It's a compelling story that bolsters national pride and lays the groundwork for the British Empire's ascendancy. As the surviving ships of the Armada make their way back to Spain, battered and broken, they bring with them tales of hardship and heroism, of a campaign that, for all its failures, is etched into the annals of history. The sailors, those who have lived to tell the tale, return to a nation grappling with the reality of its diminished stature. For them, the voyage has been a crucible, forging bonds of camaraderie amidst the trials of the sea, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of overwhelming odds. And so, the story of the Spanish Armada is one of ambition and folly, of dreams dashed upon the shoals of reality, a cautionary tale that speaks to the limits of power and the unpredictable winds of fate. As Spain licks its wounds and Europe adjusts to the new order, the legacy of the Armada looms large, a reminder that even the mightiest of empires must bow to the forces of nature and the tides of history. But don't go away just yet. There's more to uncover as we delve into the aftermath and the long-term consequences of this seismic event. Stay tuned, because the saga continues, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's next. As the Spanish Armada limps back to shore, its battered sails flapping like the tattered banners of a vanquished army, Europe is left to grapple with the aftermath of this naval debacle. The immediate ripple effect is palpable, like a stone tossed into a calm pond, sending waves of change across the continent. Spain, once the undisputed power with its sprawling empire and gilded ambitions, now finds its prestige tarnished, like a faded tapestry no longer fit for the grand halls of power. The Armada's defeat is a seismic blow, shaking the very foundations of Spanish supremacy. In the geopolitical theater, the balance of power is undergoing a dramatic shift. England, bolstered by its unexpected victory, struts onto the world stage with newfound confidence. Queen Elizabeth I, ever the savvy monarch, leverages this triumph to solidify her position, both domestically and abroad. Her reign, which might have been overshadowed by the shadow of Spanish dominance, is now illuminated by the glow of victory. England's naval prowess, once a fledgling force, is now a formidable contender, poised to challenge even the most entrenched empires. Let's not forget the economic undercurrents that are reshaping this landscape. War, as always, is an expensive affair, and the Spanish are left counting not just the cost in lives, but also in ducats. The Armada's failure is a financial sinkhole for Spain, which had already been teetering on the brink of fiscal disaster. Philip Roman II coffers are as empty as a pirate's conscience, forcing the crown to levy even harsher taxes on an already burdened populace. It's a grim reminder that even in the pursuit of glory, the bottom line will always have its say. Meanwhile, the English economy experiences an unexpected windfall. The victory over the Armada not only boosts national morale, but also invigorates English trade and maritime ventures. Privateers, those legal pirates with a royal seal, continue to plunder Spanish treasure ships, filling English vaults with gold and silver. This influx of wealth fuels a burgeoning merchant class, laying the groundwork for England's future as a global trade powerhouse. But what about the myths and legends swirling around the Armada's defeat? Here's where history dons its most beguiling mask. The romanticized narratives of a plucky English fleet, divinely favored and led by gallant heroes, are spun into the fabric of national identity. Sir Francis Drake, with his audacious tactics and devilish charm, is elevated to the status of a national icon, the pirate turned patriot. The reality, of course, is more pragmatic. Drake's victory is as much a product of luck and the weather as it is of cunning strategy. But hey, why let facts get in the way of a good story? The Spanish, on the other hand, are cast as the villains in this maritime drama, their hubris and ambition leading to a spectacular fall from grace. Yet, this caricature doesn't fully capture the complexity of the situation. The Armada was, after all, a monumental undertaking, a testament to human endeavor and the reach of an empire at its zenith. The sailors who braved the tempestuous seas did so with courage and conviction, driven by duty and faith, even as the odds stacked higher than the galleon's masts. The lessons from this ambitious yet disastrous expedition are manifold. First and foremost, it's a masterclass in the dangers of overreach. Spain's attempt to impose its will on England through force of arms is a cautionary tale of ambition outstripping capability. It's a stark reminder that power, however great, is not immune to the capriciousness of fate and the limits imposed by logistics and geography. In terms of naval warfare, the defeat of the Armada signals a paradigm shift. The age of towering galleons, laden with soldiers and cannon, is giving way to a new era where speed, maneuverability, and firepower take precedence. The English fleet's use of innovative tactics, exemplified by the fire ships and long-range bombardment, sets a precedent that will influence naval strategy for centuries. It's a clear lesson in adaptability, showing that sometimes it's not the biggest who win, but the quickest and the smartest. The Armada's legacy is also one of resilience and the human spirit's capacity to endure hardship. The sailors who survived the ordeal returned to Spain not as vanquished foes, but as veterans of a crucible that tested their mettle in ways unimaginable. Their stories of survival, of camaraderie forged in the face of adversity, are a testament to the enduring power of hope and determination. So, as we wrap up this saga of the Spanish Armada, let's not forget to take stock of its enduring significance. It's a story that continues to captivate, not just because of its grand scale and dramatic twists, but because it holds a mirror to our own ambitions and follies. The Armada's tale is a reminder that history is never just a series of dates and events, but a tapestry woven with the threads of human experience, colored by the choices we make and the consequences that follow. In the end, the Spanish Armada is more than just a footnote in the annals of history. It's a vivid chapter that speaks to the complexities of power, the unpredictability of fate, and the indomitable spirit of those who dare to dream. As the winds of history continue to blow, carrying us into new horizons, the lessons of the Armada remain as relevant as ever, guiding us through the tempestuous seas of the present and into the uncharted waters of the future. Keep your eyes on the horizon, because the adventure, dear listeners, is far from over. In the chaotic world of ancient Persia, where the crown was won as much through cunning as through the clashing of swords, Ardeshir wasn't just playing the game, he was rewriting the rules. It was the year 224 AD, and this upstart from the province of Persis had just pulled off a coup that would make any modern boardroom drama look like child's play. Ardeshir toppled the Parthian Empire, which had been bumbling along for nearly 500 years, like a clumsy toddler with a crown that didn't quite fit. The Parthians were known for their cavalry archers, and let's be honest, for sometimes being too distracted by internal squabbles to notice the walls crumbling around them. Now, Ardeshir wasn't exactly handed a neat little empire on a silver platter. He inherited a patchwork quilt of territories that was more whole than fabric. The Parthians had left behind an anemic economy and a political landscape that resembled a game of chess where half the pieces were missing. Chaos might be too gentle a word for what Ardeshir faced. It was more like inheriting a haunted house with termites. But Ardeshir wasn't about to let a little disarray slow him down. He had a vision, a map in his mind, that stretched far beyond the borders of Persis. His drive to stabilize and expand his rule was nothing short of relentless. First off, he knew he needed a reliable capital, a place that wasn't just a dot on the map, but a symbol of Sassanian strength and unity. Enter Ctesiphon, the city that would become the heart of his empire. Nestled near the Tigris River, Ctesiphon wasn't just strategic, it was a statement. Ardeshir made it clear. This was the new center of Persian power, and he was the architect of its future. Economically, things were a mess when Ardeshir took over. The Parthians hadn't exactly left behind a thriving marketplace, more like a yard sale where everything's been picked over. To get the economy back on track, Ardeshir had to think like a CEO with a failing company. He revamped trade routes, ensuring that the Silk Road didn't just pass by, but rolled out the red carpet for merchants. He encouraged agriculture, getting those fields to produce more than just weeds. This wasn't just a matter of survival. It was a strategic move to fill the empire's coffers and secure its future. Politically, Ardeshir had to be as smooth as a diplomat and as sharp as a military general. He was a master at consolidating power, reaching out to influential families and bringing them into the fold. It was a delicate dance, like playing a game of risk with real stakes. But Ardeshir knew that an empire wasn't built on might alone. It was built on loyalty and shrewd alliances. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Was Ardeshir's rise all about skill, or did Lady Luck smile upon him as well? Sure, the man had a knack for strategy and a vision that could pierce through the fog of war, but let's not pretend fortune didn't favor him in some respects. The Parthians were already on a downward spiral, weakened by years of infighting and external pressures. Ardeshir simply gave them the final push. It was like watching an old rival trip on their own shoelaces as you take the victory lap. Ardashir's rise is often painted with the brush of destiny, as if he was the chosen one in a saga of divine right. But let's not kid ourselves. He was as much a product of his time as he was a shaper of it. The political landscape was ripe for change, and he seized the moment with both hands, not to mention a well-timed cavalry charge or two. In the end, the foundation of the Sassanian Empire was as much about seizing opportunity as it was about sheer force of will. In creating the Sassanian Empire, Ardashir didn't just carve out a new realm. He set the stage for a dynasty that would last over 4 centuries. It was a testament to his ability to play the long game, balancing immediate needs with future ambitions. And while history often remembers the grand conquests and sweeping reforms, it's the savvy political moves and economic strategies that cemented his legacy. Despite the romantic tales of Ardashir as a towering figure, striding across the ruins of the Parthian world, the reality was far less straightforward. He was a man navigating a labyrinth of political intrigue, economic challenges, and military threats. Yet through it all, he emerged not just as a conqueror, but as a visionary who saw beyond the immediate chaos to the potential of what Persia could be. And so, the Sassanian Empire was born, not in a blaze of glory, but through the calculated steps of a ruler who understood that true power lay not in what you inherit, but in what you build from the ashes. With Ctesiphon as his capital and a burgeoning economy at his back, Ardashir laid the groundwork for a Persian renaissance, a new dawn that would echo through history long after his reign. And as the curtains drew on Ardashir's era, enter stage left, Shapur-I, the heir with a knack for shaking things up. Now, if Ardashir was the architect who laid the foundations, Shapur was the interior designer with a taste for opulence and a penchant for rearranging the furniture of power. Picture the Sassanian Empire not as a static monument, but as a living, breathing entity, and Shapur as the ambitious spirit determined to take it to its golden age. Shapur's reign, beginning in 240 AD, was like watching a master chess player in action, not content to merely hold the board, but to dominate it. He came onto the scene with swagger, inheriting not just a throne, but an empire poised for greatness. And boy, did he deliver. His military campaigns were as audacious as a rock star's world tour, and just as sensational. Let's talk about his biggest hit, the capture of Roman Emperor Valerian in 260 AD. That's right, not every day you hear about an emperor being taken hostage, but Shapur managed to pull off this historical heist with flair. The story goes that Valerian, leading a Roman force to counter Shapur's advances, found himself in a sticky situation in the battle near Edessa. Shapur, ever the opportunist, didn't just defeat the Roman legions, he snatched their emperor like a cat burglar grabbing the crown jewels. Valerian's capture was more than a military victory. It was a public relations coup that sent ripples across the ancient world. Imagine the social media storm if Twitter had been around back then. #Emperor captured would have been trending for weeks. But was Shapur a strategic genius, or just a master of historical PR? The truth, as always, sits somewhere in the middle. Yes, his military acumen was undeniable, but he also understood the power of optics. He didn't just imprison Valerian, he paraded him. Roman prisoners were put to work, and Valerian himself was, according to some accounts, used as a human footstool for Shapur, though that might be more legend than fact. Regardless, it was a spectacle designed to trumpet Sassanian supremacy and humiliate Rome, a classic case of turning an opponent's misfortune into your own triumph. Shapur wasn't just about warfare. He was a connoisseur of balancing aggression with diplomacy. His reign saw the Sassanian Empire not only expanding its borders, but also establishing itself as a cultural beacon. He opened dialogues with the Romans when it suited him, showcasing his diplomatic finesse. The empire under Shapur wasn't just a military powerhouse. It was a hub of trade and cultural exchange. While he was busy shaking up the political scene, he was also nurturing economic growth. His reign saw the Silk Road thrive, with Persian coffers jingling merrily as traders passed through, ensuring that the empire wasn't just feared, but also envied. The economic context of Shapur's time is crucial. The Sassanian Empire was strategically placed, a bridge between east and west, and Shapur knew how to exploit this geographical jackpot. Trade was the lifeblood of his empire, with goods flowing like a well-oiled machine. He invested in infrastructure, ensuring roads were maintained, and cities like Ctesiphon bustled with activity. This wasn't mere happenstance. It was Shapur's grand design, ensuring that prosperity wasn't just a pipe dream but a tangible reality. Now, let's not get too misty-eyed about the Sassanian Golden Age without acknowledging the shadows. The romantic narrative paints Shapur as a benevolent ruler, but let's face it, maintaining an empire was no walk in the park. It was a high-stakes game of thrones, complete with betrayal, intrigue, and the occasional backstabbing, quite literally. Shapur had to be as ruthless as he was visionary, navigating the treacherous waters of court politics and potential revolts like a seasoned sailor. Yet, for all his military and economic successes, Shapur's legacy was as much about the cultural renaissance he fostered. He commissioned grand architectural projects, temples, and monuments that spoke to the might and sophistication of the Sassanian Empire. This wasn't just about vanity or leaving a personal mark. It was about cementing a legacy that would echo through the ages. These endeavors were the empire's Instagram posts, crafted to impress and inspire awe. But here's the kicker. Shapur managed to do all this without letting the empire collapse under its own weight. That's no small feat. Empires have a nasty habit of overextending themselves, stretching too far until they snap back like a rubber band. Shapur, however, seemed to have a knack for knowing just how far he could push before pulling back. It was a delicate equilibrium, a high-wire act that few could master. The myth of Shapur as the invincible ruler is tempting to buy into, but let's not forget the reality. He wasn't without his challenges. Border skirmishes were a constant headache, and internal dissent always simmered beneath the surface. Yet, Shapur's ability to juggle these pressures and still project an image of unassailable strength speaks to his political genius. He was like a magician, keeping a dozen plates spinning at once, never letting one crash to the ground. In the grand tapestry of history, Shapur's reign stands out not just for its conquests and cultural achievements, but for its deft handling of the empire's complexities. He wasn't just a ruler who seized the moment. He was one who crafted it, molding the Sassanian Empire into a formidable force that would endure long after his reign. And while his era might be wrapped in the golden glow of legend, the reality was a mix of grit, ambition, and a touch of audacity. So, as we leave Shapur standing tall in the annals of history, it's clear his reign was not just a chapter in the Sassanian story, but a defining moment. The golden age he ushered in was a testament to his vision and tenacity. Yet, as with all golden ages, it came with its own set of tarnishes and trials, ever reminding us that history is a complex tapestry, woven with both triumphs and trials. As we look forward to exploring the legacies and challenges of Shapur's successors, it's clear that the stage is set for continuing drama in the Sassanian saga, where every player must navigate the fine line between legend and reality. As we leave Shapur standing tall in the annals of history, it's time to roll up our sleeves and dive into the nuts and bolts of the Sassanian Empire's inner workings. Spoiler alert, it wasn't all palaces and parades. The empire ran on a complex system of gears and cogs, not the least of which was its economy. Forget the romanticized notion of utopian civilization. The reality was a bit more, shall we say, bureaucratic. First, let's talk taxes. Now, if you've ever winced at your paycheck deductions, you'll sympathize with the average Sassanian citizen. The empire's tax system was as intricate as a Persian rug, designed to squeeze every last drachma from its populace. It wasn't just about lining imperial coffers, though. It was a finely tuned machine that funded everything from military campaigns to public works. The Sassanian tax code could make a modern accountant's head spin, with levies on land, livestock, trade, and even personal wealth. Think of it as the ancient precursor to the IRS, but with a bit more swordplay. What really kept the empire ticking, though, was trade. Picture the Silk Road as the ultimate superhighway of its time, with goods zooming along like a caravan of Amazon Prime deliveries. The Sassanians were strategically positioned smack dab in the middle of this global exchange, turning their empire into a bustling marketplace. Spices from India, silk from China, luxuries from the Roman world all passed through, each transaction leaving a tidy profit in Persian hands. It's no wonder the Sassanians took their infrastructure seriously. Well-maintained roads and caravanserais were the arteries of this economic powerhouse. But here's the kicker. Life in the Sassanian Empire wasn't just a perpetual bazaar. Everyday existence was a bit less glamorous, with most people toiling away in agriculture or crafts. The empire was a patchwork of farmers, artisans, and merchants, each contributing to the social fabric. Sure, the nobility might have enjoyed lavish feasts, but the average Joe, or Javad in this case, was more concerned with the next harvest than the next conquest. Now, let's not forget about the ideological glue holding this empire together, Zoroastrianism. Ahura Mazda, the Zoroastrian supreme deity, wasn't just a celestial figure. He was the guiding light of Sassanian governance. The religion shaped everything from legal codes to cultural practices. It's safe to say that Zoroastrianism was the empire's unofficial co-pilot, steering its moral and political compass. The priests, or magi, wielded significant influence, serving as both spiritual guides and advisors to the throne. Imagine a society where the line between church and state was not just blurred, but enthusiastically erased. But let's put on our myth-busting hats for a moment. The romantic image of a harmonious society, united under Zoroastrianism, glosses over some less than savory realities. The Sassanians weren't exactly poster children for religious tolerance. Non-Zoroastrians often faced heavy taxation and social exclusion, reminding us that the empire's unity was more coerced than consensual. Despite the empire's grand facade, the daily grind for most citizens was far from idyllic. Social mobility was limited, the rigid class system keeping people in their place. The king, at the top of this pyramid, was seen as a divine figure, a notion that neatly justified the status quo. It was a world where your birth often dictated your fate, a sobering reminder that the empire's splendor came at a cost. So, was the Sassanian Empire a golden age or just gilded? The allure of its architectural achievements and cultural renaissance paints a picture of prosperity. But dig a little deeper, and you'll find the human stories of struggle, ambition, and survival. The empire was a stage where grand dramas played out alongside everyday realities, each part of a complex, vibrant tapestry. As we pause to catch our breath in this whirlwind tour of Sassanian society, it's clear that the empire was a study in contrasts. Its achievements were as monumental as its challenges, with every triumph shadowed by the trials of maintaining such a vast and diverse realm. The Sassanians may have aspired to greatness, but their story is one of balancing idealism with pragmatism, a delicate dance that kept them poised on the edge of history's stage. And so, the Sassanian saga continues to unfold, with each chapter offering new insights into the empire's intricate machinery. As we prepare to dive deeper into the reigns of its subsequent rulers, the stage is set for more tales of ambition, intrigue, and the eternal struggle for power. The story of the Sassanian Empire is far from over, and I promise you, the best is yet to come. As the Sassanian Empire marched into its later years, it was clear that the glitz of its golden age came with an ominous price tag. If the empire's early days were a heady mix of ambition and expansion, the later years were more like a cautionary tale of biting off more than you can chew. Picture a once mighty lion now juggling flaming torches while riding a unicycle. Impressive, sure, but precariously close to a fall. Let's start with those never-ending wars with Rome. If you thought modern-day rivalries were intense, these ancient titans took it to a whole new level. By the time Khosrow Roman II, also known as Khosrow Parvis, took the throne in 590 AD, the empire was deeply entrenched in costly conflicts with its western neighbor. The Sassanian Roman wars were like an epic game of chess played with real armies, where each victory came with a hefty bill, both in terms of lives and treasure. Khosrow Roman II, with his grandiose ambitions, was a ruler who knew how to make an entrance. His reign began with a dramatic comeback, fleeing to the Byzantine court after being ousted by a usurper, only to return with Byzantine support and reclaim his throne. Imagine a soap opera plot with a twist of Game of Thrones, and you've got the gist. Once back in power, Khosrow didn't waste time in flexing his muscles. He embarked on a series of campaigns that at first made him look like the ultimate comeback kid. Under Khosrow Roman II, the Sassanian Empire reached its territorial zenith. We're talking about a stretch from the Levant to parts of Egypt, a realm that rivaled even the Roman Empire in its heyday. At its peak, it was a massive empire, covering about 4 million square kilometers, which is about the size of modern-day Peru. The problem: holding onto such vast lands was akin to trying to herd cats across a windy plain ambitious and ultimately exhausting. And here's the kicker. While the empire was busy expanding its borders, the economic engine back home was starting to sputter. Wars are expensive, folks, by some estimates. Khosrow's ambitious campaigns drained the royal treasury, pushing the empire into financial straits. The Sassanian economy, once a well-oiled machine, was now groaning under the weight of military expenses and the upkeep of a sprawling empire. Internally, things weren't exactly peaky either. While Khosrow was off playing conqueror back home, the political scene was a boiling pot of intrigue and dissatisfaction. The nobility, who were supposed to be the backbone of the empire, were increasingly restless. Imagine a room full of disgruntled shareholders demanding answers from a CEO who's too busy planning a hostile takeover. Not a pretty picture, right? To add fuel to the fire, Khosrow's reign was marked by religious tensions. While Zoroastrianism remained the state religion, the presence of diverse religious communities often led to friction. The sporadic persecution of Christians and other religious minorities didn't help Khosrow's popularity. It was a classic case of divide and conquer gone wrong, where instead of unifying the empire, it sowed seeds of discord. But Khosrow's most infamous move, taking on the Byzantine Empire in a full-blown war that lasted from 602 to 628 AD. This was no minor skirmish. This was an all-out slugfest that would put heavyweight boxing matches to shame. The war initially went well for the Sassanians, with Khosrow's forces capturing key Byzantine territories, including the prized city of Jerusalem in 614 AD. The triumph was short-lived, though, as the Byzantines, under Emperor Heraclius, mounted a counteroffensive that turned the tide. By 627, Heraclius had marched deep into Sassanian territory, delivering a crushing blow to Khosrow's forces at the Battle of Nineveh. Here's where it gets Shakespearean. Khosrow, once the golden boy of Persian power, was overthrown in a coup led by his own son, Kavadrum II, in 628 AD. Talk about a plot twist. Khosrow was executed, marking a grim end for a ruler who had once dreamed of glory. The empire, now teetering from war and internal strife, was like a house of cards waiting for the slightest breeze to come crashing down. The aftermath of Khosrow's reign left the Sassanian Empire in tatters. The war with Byzantium had drained resources and morale, leaving the empire vulnerable and weakened. The political scene was a veritable minefield, with successive rulers struggling to maintain any semblance of stability. The once mighty empire was now a shadow of its former self, beset by economic woes and internal divisions. So, was the Sassanian Empire doomed from the start? Or was it the victim of its own ambitions? The allure of expansion and glory is a powerful motivator, but as Khosrow's reign shows, the cost can be staggeringly high. The empire's decline was a complex tapestry of external pressures and internal fractures, a poignant reminder that even the greatest empires can crumble under the weight of their own dreams. As we pause at this critical juncture in the Sassanian saga, it's clear that the empire's story is far from over. The stage is set for more drama and intrigue as the once mighty Lion of Persia grapples with its legacy and the looming challenges ahead. Stay tuned, because the next act promises to be just as riveting, with twists and turns that will keep you on the edge of your seat. As we pick up the pieces of our story, the Sassanian Empire was teetering on the edge, a once grand colossus now stumbling under its own weight. By the 630s, the empire was a patchwork quilt of instability, with rulers changing as frequently as sarks. Picture a game of musical chairs where the music never stops. You'd be dizzy too. The political carousel saw no fewer than 14 different kings in just 4 short years, following Khosrow Roman II ignoble end. If you blinked, you might miss a coronation. Now, while the Sassanians were busy playing their own version of Who Wants to Be a King, a storm was brewing in the Arabian Peninsula. Enter the Islamic Caliphate, led by the Rashidun caliphs, who were eager to spread the word and their territory. The Caliphate was like an up-and-coming startup with a product everyone wanted, and they were ready to expand into new markets. By 633, they were knocking on the Sassanian doorstep, and this wasn't just a casual visit. They meant business. The first major clash came at the Battle of the Chains in 633 AD, where the Sassanians got a taste of the new power on the block. The battle site was near the banks of the Euphrates, and the Persian army, led by the general Hormazd Jadhai, was literally chained together, a strategy that backfired spectacularly. Perhaps they thought it would unite them, but it turns out being chained didn't exactly help with mobility when retreat became necessary. Spoiler, it did. The Islamic forces, led by Khalid ibn al-Walid, or the Sword of Allah to his friends, made quick work of the Sassanians. The battle was a stark symbol of the changing tide. While the Sassanians were relying on outdated tactics and a fractured command, the Caliphate brought fresh zeal and unity to the field. It was like watching a vintage car race against a new sports model. The old guard was simply outpaced. Fast forward to the Battle of Al-Qadisiyah in 636, decisive showdown that put the final nails in the Sassanian coffin. This battle, which lasted several days, was a grueling test of endurance for both sides, with the Sassanians led by the seasoned General Rostam Farrakhzad. Rostam was a veteran of many battles, a man who had seen the Empire's glory days, and was now tasked with saving what was left. But even he couldn't stave off the inevitable. The Caliphate's forces, using a blend of strategic cunning and sheer willpower, managed to turn the tide. Rostam was killed, and with him went the last flicker of Sassanian military might. The fall of Ctesiphon in 637 was another Bardi blow. The capital that Ardashir I had painstakingly built now lost to the winds of change. The city, with its grand palaces and bustling markets, was a jewel in the Persian crown, and its loss was a symbolic end to an era. It was as if the heart of the empire had been ripped out, leaving behind a hollow shell. As the Islamic forces advanced, the Sassanian resistance became increasingly sporadic and desperate. The final curtain came down at the Battle of Nahavand in 642, often dubbed the victory of victories by the Caliphate. This was the last major battle, and the Sassanians, despite their best efforts, were outmatched and outmaneuvered. The writing was on the wall, and it was written in bold letters. The age of the Sassanian Empire was drawing to a close. With the defeat at Nahavand, the empire disintegrated faster than a sandcastle at high tide. The last Sassanian ruler, Yazdijerd III, was a young and inexperienced monarch caught in the whirlwind. His reign was marked by flight and retreat, a tragic end to a dynasty that had once stood as a beacon of Persian civilization. Yazdijerd's attempts to rally support were met with dwindling allies and increasing isolation. He was eventually assassinated in 651, marking the official end of the Sassanian Empire. So, what went wrong? Was it simply bad luck, or were the Sassanians architects of their own demise? The truth is, it was a cocktail of both. A lack of cohesive leadership, an economy stretched to its limits, and underestimating their new adversaries played pivotal roles. The empire's downfall was a stark reminder that even the most formidable powers can crumble when their foundations are weakened. Yet, the Sassanian legacy wasn't entirely lost in the sands of time. The empire left an indelible mark on the world, influencing art, architecture, and culture for centuries to come. Their advancements in engineering, their contributions to the Silk Road, and their role in establishing Ctesiphon as a center of learning and culture was significant. The empire's emphasis on trade and cultural exchange laid groundwork that would benefit even their conquerors. Reflecting on the Sassanian story, one can't help but marvel at the cyclical nature of history. Empires rise, they shine brightly, and then, inevitably, they fall. It's a tale as old as time, a poignant reminder of the futility of hubris. The Sassanians remind us that no matter how grand an empire becomes, it is always vulnerable to the caprices of fate and the relentless march of time. And so, as the dust settled over the fallen Sassanian realm, the stage was set for new players, new dramas, and the eternal dance of power. History, it seems, has a way of repeating itself, a never-ending carousel of ambition and decline. But fear not, for each story, each empire, leaves behind its own unique legacy, a testament to human ingenuity and folly. The Sassanians, with their grandeur and their flaws, were no exception. Their tale remains a vibrant thread in the intricate tapestry of history, a tale of ambition, resilience, and ultimately the inexorable tide of change.